Hey gang, it's James coming on to talk Bible. Lots of it. So if you are the kind of person that likes to read scripture, this is your day. We're going to go through a lot. Today is kind of the culmination of my week, and it's only Wednesday, right? So I mentioned earlier in a previous video that I recently joined a group on Facebook, a Bible discussion group, and the New Covenant has been one of the topics of discussion. And, independently of that, I had posted and mentioned, that the book of Jude, when he's talking about earnestly contending for the faith once and for all delivered to the saints, was not talking about modern Christianity. He was talking about something older, okay, relative to his time, right? What we consider as modern Christianity did not exist back then. I know that that's hard for people to track sometimes, but if we just slow down and think, it's there, okay? Elements of it, yes. But, I mean, I don't know how else to say it. Logically, if you look at how Christianity has developed over 2,000 years, Jude wasn't working with that development. He was at the very beginning of it. So he didn't have all of this interpretive framework in his mind when he wrote that letter. Okay? So I'm going to talk about the New Covenant. Okay? I've kind of done this before, I think. I'm going to do it again. And again and again and again. The Old Testament is the foundation for everything in the New Testament. Okay? We cannot just go to the New Testament and start reading and expect to have any understanding. Okay? But yet that's exactly what we're taught. That's exactly what we do. Okay? So we're going to start off here. This is going to be a long video. When I get home this weekend, I will put it over on YouTube. Okay? Assuming that I don't have technical glitches that ruin it. I'll put it over on YouTube so that you guys can have that and watch it that way. Okay? And before I came on, I posted a list of scriptures. I'm going to be getting into either all or most of those in this stream. And if you look at that list of scriptures, you'll see why this is going to be long. All right? But it needs to be done. Okay, so we're going to start off in Hebrews 8. This is, the New Testament context of the New Covenant. Okay? Now, I'm not going to read it from the Gospels, the Last Supper. This is my blood of the New Covenant. We get that, okay? What he was doing is inaugurating the New Covenant in his blood. Okay, that's obviously what he was doing. And, it would be folly to dispute that. That's exactly what he was doing. And he was using that wine as a symbol, as a fill-in for the blood that he would shed the next day for the New Covenant. Okay, Paul talks about in Galatians that when you ratify a covenant, it's in blood. Okay, so the New Covenant is ratified in the blood of the Messiah. We all can understand that. I accept that 144,000%. Okay? That's not on the stand here. What is on the stand is what is the New Covenant? What are the terms of the New Covenant? What does that mean for our daily walk? What does it mean for the future? Right? We like to get all excited about end times prophecy. What does it mean for that? We're going to look at that today. Let's start off in Hebrews 8 and read it. Okay? Now, my Zondervan has a section here. It says, a better ministry. Now, for context, I have to set this up. Hebrews was written approximately 70 A.D., okay, or CE for you politically correct folk. Now, this was around the time of the fall of the temple, the destruction of the temple. So, when you look at the theme of the book of Hebrews, what he's doing is he's trying to get people to say, okay, look, the temple's about to be destroyed, or it has already been destroyed. Okay? The temple had become basically an idol to Israel, specifically Judah. Okay? And so Yahweh took it away from them. And so what do we do now? We've got no Levitical priests functioning, and we've got no standing temple. We can't do sacrifices anymore. What do? How does this affect us? And the writer of Hebrews is being like, hold on, guys. Let me introduce you to this other priesthood that you may or may not have heard about, the Melchizedek priesthood. Okay? And we see these two priesthoods running side by side. through the Bible, the Levitical and the Melchizedek. They run side by side. It's my belief that when you see somebody who is not a Levite making sacrifices, that's a Melchizedek priest. So like David, you know, I mean, it's in the Psalms, right? So when David builds the altar on the threshing floor, it says he made a sacrifice. Was he a Levite? No, he wasn't. Elijah, when he goes to the altar of Yahweh on Mount Carmel, not in the temple, not in Jerusalem, we have no idea if he was a Levite or not. And what does he do? He makes an offering. He makes a sacrifice. Melchizedek priesthood. This is my opinion, okay? That they ran side by side. And the writer is saying, hey guys, even though the Levitical's being taken away, we still have the Melchizedek order. We still have a priesthood in that order. And we have a high priest who can actually atone for our sins in his own blood. Okay? So, when we talk about a better ministry, like my Zondervan says, that's the context of what he's talking about. He's been talking about the Levitical priesthood and the Melchizedek priesthood. So, verse 1. Now the main point in what has been said is this. We have such a high priest who has taken his seat in the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens, a minister in the sanctuary and in the true tabernacle, which Yahweh pitched, not man. For every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices. So it is necessary that the high priest also have something to offer. Now if he were on earth, he would not be a priest at all, talking about the Messiah, since there are those who offer the gifts according to the law, who serve a copy and shadow of the heavenly things, just as Moses was warned by God, when he was about to erect the tabernacle. For see, he says, that you make all things according to the pattern which was shown to you on the mountain. But now he has obtained a more excellent ministry, by as much as he is also the mediator of a better covenant, which has been enacted on better promises. So right there, okay, there's a few things to unpack. This idea that the Messiah, that Christ, kept every single commandment, okay? There's 613 commandments. He kept every single one of them, and because he did that, we don't have to. The writer of Hebrews just told you, no, he didn't. All that Levitical stuff that you have to be a Levite to do, the Messiah didn't do, because he was from Judah. He wasn't a Levite. So this idea that he kept all the commandments, including the sacrificial stuff, so that's what annulled it, right? He fulfilled it, right? Is nonsense. It's not in the text. But then we get into this idea, this verse 6. He has obtained a more excellent ministry, by much as he is also the mediator of a better covenant, which has been enacted on better promises. See, James? The old covenant was terrible. The Old Covenant was defective, right? What's he saying here? More excellent, better. Does that mean the stuff that came previously was lame and terrible? No. That's what mainstream Christian theologians want it to say, but that's not what it says. Right? Like, I thought I knew good cooking, and then my wife came along, and now I have more excellent cooking, right? It doesn't mean that the stuff I had before I met my wife was terrible. You know, anyway. Okay, so, verse 7. For if that first covenant had been faultless, there would have been no occasion sought for a second. We have to do another pause here. That word covenant is in italics, even in the King James, which means it's not in the Greek text. It was added by the translators. Why? Because they thought they had to complete the context. But what's he been talking about? He's been talking about the priesthood, not the covenant in general. Now, there are spots in here where he talks about the covenant, which he's about to later, but at this point, he's been talking about the priesthood. The first priesthood had not been faultless, okay? Verse 8, for finding fault with them, the people, not the covenant, he says, now we're going to quote Jeremiah 31:31 and beyond. Behold, days are coming, says the Lord, says Yahweh, when I will effect a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not like the covenant which I made with their fathers, on the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. For they did not continue in my covenant. They did not continue in my covenant. And I did not care for them, says Yahweh. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yahweh. After those days. Those three words are the most important words in the whole thing. Okay? We're going to look at those days. We're going to bring a boatload of context to what those days look like. Because we have to know what those days look like if we're going to understand what the new covenant looks like. All right? So, I will put my law into their minds, and I will write them on their hearts. And I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall not teach every one his fellow citizen, and every one his brother, saying, Know Yahweh. For all will know me, from the least to the greatest of them. For I will be merciful to their iniquities, and I will remember their sins no more. When he said a new covenant, again, covenant is italicized, so let's read it correctly. When he says anew, he has made the first obsolete. But whatever is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to disappear. Okay? So he's talking about the priesthood and the covenant. Okay? So let's take verse 13 and let's apply it to the priesthood. Okay? Like I just said, the temple's about to be destroyed, or just was. Okay? So if I apply that to the priesthood has been made obsolete. Yeah. The Levitical priesthood's obsolete without a temple. Right? Makes perfect sense. If I apply it to the old covenant, the Sinaitic covenant, there's something interesting. It's becoming obsolete and growing old and ready to disappear. Now, this was written around 70, which was approximately 40 years after Calvary. Let's slow down and think about this. Let's use our brains. 40 years after Calvary, the writer of Hebrews is saying, if I'm to interpret this as talking about the old covenant, the Sinaitic covenant, it's growing old. And it's ready to disappear. But I thought it did 40 years earlier, right? Didn't it disappear 40 years? Wasn't it obsolete 40 years earlier? Wasn't it nailed to the cross 40 years earlier? Etc., etc., ad nauseum? What are we talking about here? Another thing, when you go up and you look at verse 8, okay, my translation, the New American Standard says, Behold, days are coming, says the Lord, when I will effect a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. That word effect, when you look it up in the Greek, it means to conclude. Okay? To complete. As in, you know, like wrap up, kind of, you know, like it's almost like the idea of pleroo, okay, fulfill. You know, that has the idea of something has a potential and you're filling it up. Okay, you're maximizing it. You're really doing it. Okay, in some contexts you can say be like preach fully. Okay, sort of a similar idea here. But I will effect a new covenant. That's not the same thing as making a new covenant, right? When you make a new covenant, you're not bringing it to completion. This is transition language. And this is the whole point I'm going to make with this. The new covenant is a transition. We are transitioning into it. It's not like we look on a timeline where we have a straight line of chronology and we have dots that represent specific events. And we look on one side of the dot and we see Old Covenant, and we look on the other side and we see New Covenant. No. When you look at the Bible, Paul says in Galatians, okay, that when the covenant of Sinai was made, when it didn't annul the promises made to Abraham, which was also a covenant. So Paul's saying that the Abrahamic covenant is running concurrently with the Sinaitic covenant. So why do we think that the new covenant can't do the same thing? Why do we think that automatically the new covenant has to replace the old covenant? Did the old covenant replace the Abrahamic covenant? Not according to Paul. We're talking transition. Okay? So let's really unpack this. Let's go to Jeremiah 31:31. And let's read the actual text that was quoted from the writer of Hebrews. Jeremiah 31:31. We're going to do a lot of reading. Let's start reading in verse 27. Okay? Jeremiah 31:27. Behold, days are coming, declares the Lord Yahweh, when I will sow the house of Israel and the house of Judah with the seed of man and with the seed of beasts. As I have watched over them to pluck up, to break down, to overthrow, to destroy, and to bring disaster, so will I watch over them to build and to plant, declares Yahweh. In those days they will not say again, the fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. We would call that in modern times generational curses, right? Excuse me. The fathers do something, the fathers sin, and the kids pay the price, right? Now that happens, you know, as far as like cause and effect kind of stuff, but that's not what they're talking about here. We're still talking about that idea as if it's valid today. That should tell us something. Verse 30, but everyone will die for his own iniquity. Each man who eats the sour grapes, his teeth will be set on edge. Personal accountability before the throne. Behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, Yahweh, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Not like the covenant which I made with their fathers in the day I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. This is what the writer of Hebrews quoted. Although I was a husband to them. Marriage language, declares Yahweh. Because marriage is a covenant, right? When you enter into marriage, you make a vow, you make an oath, you make a covenant. Both parties agree to terms. And if any party breaks those terms, it's grounds for divorce, right? We're talking covenant. But this is the covenant which I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them, and on their heart I will write it, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. They will not teach again each man his neighbor, and each man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, or know Yahweh, for they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and their sin I will remember no more. Okay? So, we're going to just stop and unpack a couple things here, and then we're going to blow this up when we start the rest of the scriptures. Who's the new covenant with? Gentile Christianity, right? No. The new covenant is with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Now, what does he say? Back in verse 27. He's going to sow the house of Israel and the house of Judah with the seed of man, meaning other humans, and with the seed of beast. That's where the Gentiles come in. He's going to take Gentiles, and he's going to bring them into the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Along with their animals, apparently, right? It's a kingdom. We're talking kingdom. That's where the Gentiles come in. The new covenant is made with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not with the Gentile Christian church. Okay? Gentiles have to be grafted into Israel. Paul talks about it ad nauseum. All right? There is no Gentile tree. We read the... Man, my nose is dry, guys. I'm sorry. That's embarrassing. You go to Revelation, the New Jerusalem. There's no Gentile gate. The gates are the 12 tribes of Israel. Right? So, you know, Peter, the Catholics consider him the first pope. Who's he going to be judging? The 12 disciples are going to judge the 12 tribes of Israel. You know? So, anyway. Okay, so this is what we're talking about. It's with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. And this is the whole thing. We're going to see this idea of the house of Israel and the house of Judah over and over again in these scriptures we're going to read here. Okay? He's talking about a new heart, right? He's talking about writing them on our hearts, putting them within us. Logically, if he did away with his law, he cannot put it on our hearts. Right? Think about those tablets of stone. Let's go back to Mount Sinai. Let's do a thought exercise. Let's say Moses gets up to the mountain the second time, right? Because they broke the covenant. Moses smashes the tablets. He goes back up for a repeat. Yahweh says, you guys broke my covenant, so I'm just doing away with it. Okay? I'm just going to do away with my covenant. I'm going to do away with the commandments. My law is done. Okay? So Moses says, but you told me you were going to put those on these tablets. Okay? So how's that going to work? If Yahweh canceled the commandments and said, these are obsolete, we don't have to do them anymore, how's he going to write, how or why even would he write them on the tablets? It doesn't make sense. There's no practical need for that. There's no logical, practical, functional need to write his law on our hearts and put it within us if he doesn't want us to keep it. Okay, so now we're going to back up. We're going to come back to Jeremiah 30 and 31. I said 30 on purpose. It wasn't a typo. But let's go to Deuteronomy 30 first. Okay? If you've got that post I did earlier, you'll be able to follow along these scriptures and anticipate where I'm going. Deuteronomy 30 has to be probably one of my favorite chapters in the whole Word. I love it. I love it. You know why? Because I'm living it. I'm living it. Living prophecy, it's great. Unless you're living the curses, which is not so great. A lot of people are going to be doing that when we get up towards the end. And it's going to be their own doing. So, Deuteronomy 30. Zondervan's heading says, restoration promised. Restoration. What's being restored? Let's take a look. So it shall be when all these things have come upon you. Now, I want you to think thematically as I read all these verses, okay? The new covenant. Themes along with the new covenant, right? New heart, new spirit, on our hearts, inside of us, right? These kinds of ideas. Forgiveness of sins. That's key to the new covenant, because the promises of the new covenant can't come in unless there's forgiveness of sins. There has to be. It's all connected. So it shall be when all these things have come upon you, the blessing and the curse which I have set before you, and you call them to mind in all the nations where Yahweh your God has banished you. And you return to Yahweh your God and obey him with all your heart and soul, according to all that I command you today, you and your sons. Then Yahweh your God will restore you from captivity and have compassion on you, and will gather you again from all the peoples where Yahweh your God has scattered you. I would argue that the average mainstream Christian pastor out there has no clue what this is talking about. And that's okay. We can all learn, we can all grow. We're not in the grave yet, right? So let's do that together here. What's he talking about? When we look at the history of Israel, okay, when they were going into the land, Yahweh told them, you guys, and Moses prophesied it, you guys are going to fall off the wagon, you're going to break my covenant, and I'm going to kick you out of the land. That happened eventually. Okay? And he's looking at it here. When that's over with, when you've been kicked out of the land, you've been spread out to the four corners of the earth, then I'm going to bring you back. When does he bring it back? When does he bring it back? When we call them to mind, these curses, right? In all the nations where Yahweh has banished us, and we return to him with all our heart and soul, like we're supposed to, right? The first great commandment. Love Yahweh your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Right? Then he will restore us from captivity. He's going to bust us all out of jail, right? We were watching The Chosen the other night, and Jesus, Yahshua, is talking about, John's disciples come, and they're like, "Are you really the one? Are you the one we should look for?" And he's like, tell them, that the lame walk, the blind are healed, and he says, and the captives are freed, right? And they ask him, what do you mean the captives are freed? Well, I don't mean like from jail. I mean from like, depression and, vices, or I forget how he worded it. But the typical way we look at that, right? When we look at how Christ when we look at how Christ frees the captives, we're captives to sin. And that's all true. But in context, that's not what he meant. Okay? When he's talking about captivity, when he's talking about restoring the captivity, having compassion on you, and gathering you again from all the peoples where Yahweh has scattered us, that's what he means by captivity. He means the exile. So when he talks about, setting the captives free, we're going to look at that theme. It's not busting us out of jail. It's not, we stop smoking, we stop pornography, we stop drinking. It's not that kind of stuff. Okay? Now, he can do that, but in context, that's not what he's talking about here. You've got Muslims in prison who convert and they change their lives and they clean up their behavior for Allah. Okay? So it's not like the Messiah is the only one that people will clean up for. But he is the only one that can bring the exiles back from captivity. Nobody else can do that. Only the shepherd can do that. He who scattered Israel will gather him. And we'll look at that here in a little bit later too. Verse 4, if your outcasts are at the ends of the earth, from there Yahweh your God will gather you, and from there he will bring you back. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just going to have to blow my nose. I'll do it off camera. This is embarrassing, but this is life. Sorry, guys. Air is like really dry here for some reason. I don't know. Okay, so verse 5. Yahweh your God will bring you into the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it, and he will prosper you and multiply you more than your fathers. What's he talking about here? Your fathers possessed, right? Israel entered into the promised land. They possessed it for a while, and then they were kicked out and spread out among the nations like he just talked about. They're going to come back, and they're going to possess it. Why would that be important? Because somebody made a promise to Abraham that he and his descendants would live and possess that land forever. And because that oath was unconditional, it has to be fulfilled. That's what we're looking at here. Verse 6, moreover, Yahweh your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants to love Yahweh your God with all your heart and with all your soul, so that you may live. Talking to people who are already alive. Interesting. Could he be talking eternal life? Yahweh your God will inflict all these curses on your enemies and on those who hate you and persecuted you. And you shall again, meaning they stopped at one point, you shall again obey Yahweh and observe all his commandments which I command you today. So, when all his people are scattered to the ends of the earth, and they start to remember, hey, these blessings and curses, we need to get right. We need to return. He's going to start bringing them back. He's going to restore them to the land. He's going to circumcise our hearts. Why? So that we can observe his commandments. Verse 9, then Yahweh your God will prosper you abundantly in all the work of your hand. Joel Osteen should read this, right? In the offspring of your body, and in the offspring of your cattle, and in the produce of your ground. For Yahweh will again rejoice over you for good, just as he rejoiced over your fathers. If you obey Yahweh your God to keep his commandments and his statutes, which are written in this book of the law, if you turn to Yahweh your God with all your heart and soul, for this commandment which I command you today is not too difficult for you, nor is it out of reach. It's not in heaven that you should say, who will go up to heaven for us to get it for us and make us hear it that we may observe it? Nor is it beyond the sea that you should say, who will cross the sea for us to get it for us and make us hear it that we may observe it? But the word is very near you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may observe it. No excuses. It's not too hard. It's not too hard. Okay, so let's keep reading. Verse 15, see, I have set before you today life and prosperity and death and adversity, in that I command you today to love Yahweh your God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commandments, and his statutes, and his judgments, that you may live and multiply, and that Yahweh your God may bless you in the land where you are entering to possess it. Okay, so he's back to talking about you're going to enter the land. Okay, he's just told them what's going to happen after they enter the land, after they get kicked out, and when Yahweh brings them back. So he's going back and he's jumping around in time here. 17, but if your heart turns away and you will not obey, but are drawn away and worship other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall surely perish. This is talking about people who are going to die at some point anyway, right? Could we be talking second death language here? I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. So choose life in order that you may live, even though you're already alive, you and your descendants, by loving Yahweh your God, by obeying his voice, and by holding fast to him. For this is your life and the length of your days, that you may live in the land which Yahweh swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give them. He just made that statement on the back of making some eternal life and eternal death statements, guys. If we slow down and think logically about what he's saying, he is talking eternal life and eternal death. And it's in the context of this restoration. It's in the context of having circumcised hearts by the Father, keeping His commandments, and living in the land promised to the forefathers, the Abrahamic covenant. Go somewhere and hear that preached on Sunday. You're not. All right, so let's go to the next scripture. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 42. Some of the stuff in Isaiah I might not get through because it's so much. But we'll see. Isaiah 42. You've got the scripture list that I posted earlier. You can read it on your own time if I don't get to it. Okay. So, let's see here. Oh, one other thing. He called heaven and earth to witness against him, right? Heaven and earth is still here. That's why in Matthew chapter 5, the Messiah says, heaven and earth will pass away. Right? He says, not one jot or tittle will pass away from the Torah, the law, until heaven and earth pass away. Why? Because heaven and earth are witnesses to that covenant. Right? Okay, let's see here. Verse 42, chapter 42 through 44. This is a lot to read. Do I want to read this whole thing? Let's do it. Let's do it, team. Isaiah chapter 42. Behold my servant. Okay, we're getting into those servant chapters of Isaiah here. The servant has a job. He's a servant, right? Behold my servant, who I uphold, my chosen one, in whom my soul delights. I have put my spirit upon him. He will bring forth justice to the nations. He will not cry out or raise his voice, nor make his voice heard in the street. This sounds familiar, huh? A bruised reed he will not break, and a dimly burning wick he will not extinguish. He will faithfully bring forth justice. He will not be disheartened or crushed until he has established justice in the earth. And the coastlands will wait expectantly for his law. Thus says God, the Lord, your English will say, who created the heavens and stretched them out, who spread out the earth and its offspring, who gives breath to the people on it, and spirit to those who walk in it. I am Yahweh. I have called you in righteousness. I will also hold you by the hand and watch over you, and I will appoint you as a covenant to the people. Okay, he's talking about the servant here. I will appoint you as a covenant to the people, as a light to the nations, to open blind eyes, to bring out prisoners from the dungeon, and those who dwell in darkness from the prison. I am Yahweh, that is my name. I will not give my glory to another, nor my praise to graven images. Behold, the former things have come to pass. Now I declare new things. Before they spring forth, I proclaim them to you. So this servant is going to be appointed as a covenant to the people. He's going to establish justice in the earth, and the coastlands will wait expectantly for his law, his Torah. Now we just read, who's going to be in the coastlands? His people that were spread around the earth when they were kicked out of the land for disobedience and backsliding? They're going to wait expectantly for his Torah. Why? Christianity would say, well, these are Gentiles, right? Why would they wait expectantly for his law? Why is he a covenant for the people? Sing to Yahweh a new song. Sing his praise from the end of the earth. You who go down to the sea and all that is in it. You islands and those who dwell on them. Let the wilderness and its cities lift up their voices, the settlements where Kedar inhabits. Let the inhabitants of Selah sing aloud. Let them sing for joy from the tops of the mountains. Let them give glory to Yahweh and declare his praise in the coastlands. Yahweh will go forth like a warrior. He will arouse his zeal like a man of war. He will utter a shout. Yes, he will raise a war cry. I don't want to be on the receiving end of that, guys. He will prevail against his enemies. Excuse me, verse 14. I have kept silent for a long time, and I've kept still and restrained myself. Now like a woman in labor I will groan, and I will both gasp and pant. I will lay waste the mountains and hills and wither all their vegetation. I will make the rivers into coastlands and dry up the ponds. I will lead the blind by a way they do not know. In paths they do not know, I will guide them. I will make darkness into light before them, and rugged places into plains. These are the things I will do, and I will not leave them undone. They will be turned back and be utterly put to shame, who trust in idols, who say to molten images, you are our gods. Hear, you deaf, and look, you blind, that you may see. Who is blind but my servant, or so deaf as my messenger whom I send? Who is so blind as he who is at peace with me, or so blind as the servant of Yahweh? You've seen many things, but you do not observe them. Okay? So, this is where the anti-missionaries jump in and they say, see, he's talking about Israel. When we read these servant chapters, he flip-flops between Israel, like as the people collectively, his firstborn, and this servant figure who is not corporate Israel. Okay? But the Tobiah singers of the world can't see that. They see, oh, it says Israel. We're kind of transitioning, I think, more over to his people at this point, because we are supposed to serve him, right? Yahweh was pleased for his righteousness' sake, to make the law great and glorious, the Torah. But this is a people plundered and despoiled. All of them are trapped in caves, or are hidden away in prisons. They become a prey with none to deliver them, and a spoil with none to say, give them back. Who among you will give ear to this? Who will give heed and listen hereafter? Who gave Jacob up for spoil, and Israel to plunderers? Was it not Yahweh, against whom we have sinned, and in whose ways they were not willing to walk, and whose law they did not obey? So he poured out on them the heat of his anger, and the fierceness of battle, and it set him aflame all around. Yet he did not recognize it, and it burned him, but he paid no attention. It sounds like in Revelation, all this wrath is coming on the nations, and they still won't repent. Chapter 43. But now, thus says Yahweh your Creator, O Jacob, Israel, and he who formed you, O Israel, do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by my name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers they will not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be scorched, nor will the flame burn you. For I am Yahweh your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. I have given Egypt as your ransom, Cush and Seba in your place. Since you are precious in my sight, since you are honored and I love you, I will give other men in your place, and other peoples in exchange for your life. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bring your offspring from the east, and gather them from the west. I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not hold them back. Bring back my sons from afar, and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Everyone who is called by my name, and whom I have created for my glory, whom I have formed, even whom I have made. Let me see. Do I want to keep reading here? I'm going to let you guys read the rest of that. This is going to be long. I'm going to go to... Let's see here. Yeah, I'm going to skip the rest of that for now. Okay. But on your own time, finish reading through chapter 44. All right? You'll start to see some of these themes. Okay. Let's go to Isaiah 49. Now, I could read all the way through chapter 66, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to read 49. Isaiah 49. But if you're interested, go all the way. Like, you see these themes all through there. Okay, these servant chapters. You see these themes. 49. Listen to me, O islands, and pay attention, you peoples from afar. Think Deuteronomy 30. Yahweh called me from the womb. From the body of my mother he named me. He has made my mouth like a sharp sword. In the shadow of his hand he has concealed me. They'll say this is Israel, the nation. We'll see who it really is. He has also made me a select arrow. He has hidden me in his quiver. He said to me, you are my servant, Israel. See? Let's keep going. In whom I will show my glory. But I said, this servant, I have toiled in vain. I've spent my strength for nothing and vanity. Yet surely the justice due to me is with Yahweh, and my reward is with my God. And now says Yahweh, who formed me from the womb to be his servant, to bring Jacob back to him, so that Israel might be gathered to him. For I am honored in the sight of Yahweh, and my God is my strength. So this servant is going to be gathering Jacob and bringing Israel back to Yahweh. How does that work if the servant is Israel, the people? Now he's called Israel here, right? What does Israel mean? Wrestled with Elohim, or strived with Elohim. It has the context of like, I don't even know how you describe it. Not necessarily violence, but just a really close dealing with. Okay, so anyway, so let's keep going. Verse 6, he says, "Is it too small a thing that you should be my servant, to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to restore the preserved ones of Israel?" This is somebody acting upon Israel, so it cannot be the people of Israel. This is the servant. Okay? "I will also make you a light of the nations." Why? "So that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth. Thus says Yahweh, the Redeemer of Israel and its Holy One, to the despised one, to the one abhorred by the nation," singular, not plural. They'll say, this is Israel, because the nations abhor. No, the nation abhors this servant. Can we think of a nation that abhors this servant? "To the servant of rulers, kings will see and arise. Princes will also bow down, because Yahweh who is faithful, the Holy One of Israel, who has chosen you. Thus says Yahweh," verse 8, "In a favorable time I have answered you, and in a day of salvation I have helped you." Is he talking about personal salvation? Is he talking about saving you individually from hellfire? Or is he talking about something bigger? "And I will keep you and give you for a covenant of the people." This is the second time, and I think there's more, but the second time we read where this servant is going to be given as a covenant to the people. Do we read this when we read Jeremiah 31:31 and Hebrews 8? Do we even think about this? "To restore the land." Okay, so this is why. This servant is going to be given as a covenant to the people. Why? "To restore the land, to make them inherit the desolate heritages, saying to those who are bound, go forth. To those who are in darkness, show yourselves. To those who are in," I just read that, "along the roads they will feed, and their pasture will be on all bare heights." Why are they along the roads? Because they're going somewhere? "And their pasture will be on all the bare heights. They will not hunger or thirst, nor will the scorching heat or sun." I got to back up. "Their pasture will be on all the bare heights." When we read Scripture, what is always on the heights? What is always on the high places? Shrines? Altars to the idols? Groves, high places, Asherim? We're going to be grazing in those places. We're going to be actually using them for something productive. Okay. So, verse 10, "They will not hunger or thirst, nor will the scorching heat or sun strike them down. For he who has compassion on them will lead them, and will guide them to springs of water. I will make all my mountains a road, and my highways will be raised up." This is all spiritual. This is all spiritual, we're told. What if it's literal? What if it's literal? "Behold, these will come from afar, and lo, these will come from the north." He's saying it again. "And from the west, and these from the land of Sinim. Shout for joy, O heavens, and rejoice, O earth. Break forth into joyful shouting, O mountains. For Yahweh has comforted his people, and will have compassion on his afflicted. But Zion said, Yahweh's forsaken me, and the Lord has forgotten me. Can a woman forget her nursing child and have no compassion on the son of her womb? Even these may forget, but I will not forget you. Behold, I've inscribed you on the palms of my hands. Your walls are continually before me. Your builders hurry. Your destroyers and devastators will depart from you. Lift up your eyes and look around. All of them gather together. They come to you, meaning Zion. As I live, declares Yahweh. Okay? Now, when he says, as I live, he's making an oath by himself. He's swearing by himself. This absolutely 144,000% will happen. As I live, declares Yahweh, you will surely put on all of them as jewels and bind them on as a bride. For your waste and desolate places and your destroyed land. Surely now you will be too cramped for the inhabitants, and those who swallowed you will be far away. The children of whom you were bereaved will yet say in your ears, The place is too cramped for me. Make room for me that I may live here. Then you will say in your heart, who has begotten these for me, since I have been bereaved of my children? If you've lost a child, like I have, if you are in this moment where you are being gathered back in the land by the one who is given to you as a covenant, you will see your children again if they were bereaved. If you were bereaved of your children, they will be here. And where is all this? Is this in heaven? Who has begotten these for me, since I've been bereaved of my children, and I'm barren, an exile, and a wanderer? And who has reared these? Behold, I was left alone. From where did these come? 22. Thus says Yahweh Elohim, behold, I will lift up my hand to the nations, and set up my standard to the peoples. And they will bring your sons in their bosom, and your daughters will be carried on their shoulders. Kings will be your guardians, and their princesses your nurses. They will bow down to you with their faces to the earth, and lick the dust of your feet. And you will know that I am Yahweh. Those who hopefully wait for me will not be put to shame. Can the prey be taken from the mighty man, or the captives of a tyrant be rescued? Well, let's find out. Surely thus says Yahweh, even the captives of the mighty man will be taken away, and the prey of the tyrant will be rescued. For I will contend with the one who contends with you, and I will save your sons. Think Deuteronomy 30. And I will feed your oppressors with their own flesh, and they will become drunk with their own blood as with sweet wine. And all flesh will know that I, Yahweh, am your Savior, and your Redeemer, the Mighty One of Jacob. Now I could keep going to 66, and I would love to, but I got a boatload of scriptures left. Okay? So this is all talking about the same kind of stuff. His people being gathered from afar, being brought back into the land. This servant is going to be a covenant to them, right? He's going to be our God, and we're going to be his people. All of these themes that we see in the new covenant in Jeremiah and in Hebrews. So let's keep going. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 3. Let's get into Jeremiah now. We're going to start reading in verse 11. Jeremiah 3, verse 11. And Yahweh said to me, faithless Israel has proved herself more righteous than treacherous Judah. Why is he talking about Israel and Judah? Remember the language of the new covenant? The new covenant is with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Okay? That's important. That's very important. Go and proclaim these words toward the north and say, why? Why is he doing this? Because the people were taken captive to the north. Return, faithless Israel, declares Yahweh. I will not look upon you in anger, for I am gracious, declares Yahweh. I will not be angry forever. Amen and hallelujah. Only acknowledge your iniquity, that you've transgressed against Yahweh your God, and have scattered your favors to the strangers under every green tree. Jingle bells and... let's keep going. Okay, so, and you have not obeyed my voice, declares Yahweh. Return, O faithless sons, declares Yahweh, for I am a master to you, and I will take you one from a city and two from a family, and will bring you to Zion. One from a city and two from a family? The narrow gate, right? The straight gate, the narrow path? Then I will give you shepherds after my own heart, who will feed you on knowledge and understanding. Who else was a shepherd after Yahweh's own heart? David, right? We're going to read about him in some of this. On your own free time, take a look at some of his writings. Go to Psalm 19. Go to Psalm 119. Take a look and see what this shepherd after Yahweh's own heart has to say. Verse 16. It shall be in those days when you are multiplied and increased in the land, declares Yahweh, they will no longer say, the ark of the covenant of Yahweh, and it will not come to mind, nor will they remember it, nor will they miss it, nor will it be made again. That hasn't happened yet, guys. This is not talking about the Jews being gathered into the land, because they're still talking about the Ark of the Covenant. How great it would be when they rebuild their temple to have an Ark of the Covenant. Now, they obviously won't have the tablets in it, right? Verse 17, at that time they will call Jerusalem the throne of Yahweh. Has that happened? And all the nations will be gathered to it. Has that happened? to Jerusalem for the name of Yahweh, or the authority of Yahweh. We're talking about a kingdom here, guys. Nor will they walk any more after the stubbornness of their evil heart. In those days the house of Judah will walk with the house of Israel, and they will come together from the land of the north to the land that I gave your fathers as an inheritance. Why would they do that, guys? Why would they do that, Christian theologians? Verse 19, then I said, how I would set you among my sons and give you a pleasant land, the most beautiful inheritance of the nations. And I said, you shall call me my father, and not turn away from following me. Surely as a woman treacherously departs from her lover, so you have dealt treacherously with me, O house of Israel, declares Yahweh. A voice is heard in the bare heights, verse 21, the weeping and supplications of the sons of Israel. Because they have perverted their way, they have forgotten Yahweh their God. Return, O faithless sons, I will heal your faithlessness. Now think about this logically. How does he heal our faithlessness, our lack of faith? How is that healed? He's going to do something that's going to cause us to have faith in him. Behold, we come to you, for you are Yahweh our God. 23. Surely the hills are a deception, a tumult on the mountains. Surely in Yahweh our God is the salvation of Israel. This is not New Testament. This is not talking about personal salvation. I mean, personal salvation exists, yeah. But think bigger. The new covenant is huge. But the shameful thing has consumed the labor of our fathers since our youth, their flocks and their herds, their sons and their daughters. Let us lie down in our shame and let our humiliation cover us, for we have sinned against Yahweh our God, we and our fathers from our youth even to this day, and we have not obeyed the voice of Yahweh our God. Okay, Jeremiah 16. I was talking with a brother earlier today. Really good conversation. And he quoted part of this right as I was about to quote it. So here we go. Let's read the whole chapter. Now, mine has two headings. Starts off, distresses foretold. When we get to verse 14, it says, God will restore them. Let's figure out what that means. The word of Yahweh also came to me, saying, you shall not take a wife for yourself, nor have sons or daughters in this place. Talking to Jeremiah. For thus says Yahweh concerning the sons and daughters born in this place, and concerning their mothers who bear them, and their fathers who beget them in this land. They will die of deadly diseases. They will not be lamented or buried. Why am I reading this? Why am I reading this in the context of the New Covenant? This is talking about the fall of Jerusalem when Jeremiah was around, right? Let's keep going. There's always a setup. They will die of deadly diseases. They will not be lamented or buried. They will be as dung on the surface of the ground and come to an end by sword and famine, and their carcasses will become food for the birds of the sky and for the beasts of the earth. For thus says Yahweh, do not enter a house of mourning or go to lament or to console them, for I have withdrawn my peace from this people, declares Yahweh, my loving kindness and compassion. Both great men and small will die in this land. They will not be buried. They will not be lamented, nor will anyone gash himself or shave his head for them, which we're not supposed to do anyway. Men will not break bread in mourning for them, to comfort anyone for the dead, nor give them a cup of consolation to drink for anyone's father or mother. Moreover, you shall not go into a house of feasting to sit with them to eat and drink. For thus says Yahweh of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I am going to eliminate from this place before your eyes and in your time the voice of rejoicing and the voice of gladness, the voice of the groom and the voice of the bride. Interesting. Now, when you tell this people all these words, they will say to you, for what reason has Yahweh declared all this great calamity against us? And what is our iniquity? Or what is our sin that we've committed against Yahweh our God? These people are either massively arrogant or massively ignorant. Like, they seriously, if I read this literally, they seriously have no clue why they're being judged. And I mean, but we're more spiritual than them, right? This would never happen to us. Verse 11. Then you're to say to them, it's because your forefathers have forsaken me, declares Yahweh, and have followed other gods and served them and bowed down to them. But me they have forsaken and have not kept my law. So he equates forsaking him with not keeping his Torah. Interesting. You too have done evil, even more than your forefathers. For behold, you are each one walking according to the stubbornness of his own evil heart without listening to me. So I will hurl you out of this land into the land which you have not known. Go back to Deuteronomy 30. He's talking about that again. Neither you nor your fathers, and there you will serve other gods day and night, for I will grant you no favor. Verse 14. Therefore, behold, days are coming. Didn't we just read that language in chapter 31? Behold, days are coming. Right? Behold, days are coming, declares Yahweh, when it will no longer be said, as Yahweh lives, who brought up the sons of Israel out of the land of Egypt. Now, ask yourself, what I'm about to read here, is this literal or is it spiritual? And if you're going to say it's spiritual, why not just come out and tell us the spiritual thing he wants to know here? Okay? This is my position on the whole thing. When he's talking about land, when he's talking about restoring people to the land, if he always meant heaven, why not just say it? We're not stupid. We can understand that. Okay. Therefore, behold, days are coming, declares Yahweh, when it will no longer be said, as Yahweh lives, who brought up the sons of Israel out of the land of Egypt, but as Yahweh lives, who brought up the sons of Israel from the land of the north. We have that again here, right? And from all the countries where he had banished them, for I will restore them to their own land, which I gave to their fathers. Behold, I'm going to send for many fishermen, declares Yahweh. Come with me, come follow me, I'll make you fishers of men, right? Why were they so quick to follow him? You think maybe they knew this? Declares Yahweh, and they will fish for them. And afterwards I will send for many hunters, and they will hunt for them from every mountain and every hill and from the clefts of the rocks. For my eyes are on all their ways, they're not hidden from my face, nor is their iniquity concealed from my eyes. I will first doubly repay their iniquity and their sin, because they polluted my land. They have filled my inheritance with the carcasses of their detestable idols and with their abominations. O Yahweh, my strength and my stronghold and my refuge in the day of distress, to you the nations will come. That nations generally is Goy or Goyim, which would be Gentiles in the New Testament. The nations will come from the ends of the earth and say, our fathers have inherited nothing but lies, falsehood, futility, and things of no profit. Can man make gods for himself, yet they're not gods? Therefore, behold, I'm going to make them know. This time I will make them know my power and my might, and they will know that my name is Yahweh. Do the nations out there in the world know that his name is Yahweh? Are they coming to him saying that our fathers have inherited falsehoods and lies? No. It's never happened, but it's going to happen.
Say a command.
GPS is still on. Now, why am I reading all this? Okay? Why am I reading all this? We're going to eventually get to Jeremiah 30. I intentionally left that out. Jeremiah 30 and 31 are part of one block of context, and nobody ever reads the front part of that. They always go right to 31 in that area. They never read 30. The reason I'm holding off on that is because all of these themes that we see here, all of these ideas of bringing the people in from the north and, circumcising our hearts so that we'll obey him and all these things, they're going to come into play when we get into the New Covenant chapters. Chapters, plural. That's fun, right? Chapters. Anyway. Okay, so let's go to... I'm sorry, guys. I'm down in Virginia right now, and the weather must be changing. I don't know. I'm not sick. It's not allergies. It's just like dry air or something. Okay, so let's go to Jeremiah 23, and let's read verses 1 through 8. Now, my Zondervan says, the coming Messiah, the righteous branch. So, actually... yeah, okay. Woe to the shepherds who are destroying and scattering the sheep of my pasture, declares Yahweh. Therefore thus says Yahweh, God of Israel, concerning the shepherds who are tending my people. You have scattered my flock and driven them away, and have not attended to them. Behold, I am about to attend to you for the evil of your deeds, declares Yahweh. Then I myself will gather the remnant of my flock out of all the countries where I have driven them, and bring them back to their pasture, and they will be fruitful and multiply. Go back to Deuteronomy 30. He's still talking about that. I will also raise up shepherds over them, and they will tend them, and they will not be afraid any longer, nor be terrified, nor will any be missing. People wonder why young people are leaving Christianity in droves. It's because Christianity is driving them away. But we can't accept that, can we? It has to be some external influence. It has to be, maybe we need to get another Starbucks in our church. No. The Christian church, by and large, the shepherds are driving the people away because they are presenting a watered-down, polluted gospel to the nations, and people ain't falling for it anymore. Verse 5, Behold, the days are coming. There's that language again, right? Declares Yahweh, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, and he will reign as king, and act wisely, and do justice and righteousness in the land. This king is going to do justice, and he's going to do righteousness, which means that righteousness has to do with our conduct.
100%.
In his days, Judah will be saved, and Israel will dwell securely. And this is his name by which he will be called, Yahweh our righteousness. He's mentioning Judah and Israel again, separately, for a reason. Verse 7, Therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares Yahweh, when they will no longer say, As Yahweh lives, who brought up the sons of Israel from the land of Egypt. Didn't we just read this back in 16? But as Yahweh lives, who brought up and led back the descendants of the household of Israel from the northland and from all the countries where I have driven them, then they will live on their own soil. Remember back in Isaiah 49 how it said that the servant was going to gather Jacob and restore them to the land? They're going to rebuild the waste cities and restore the desolate heritages? Verse 9, As for the prophets, was I going to go that far? I could. I'm going to stop there. Okay, so now let's go to the New Covenant chapters. The New Covenant chapters, right? Now let's go to Jeremiah 30. I already read part of 31. Now this time I'm going to start in verse 30. And everything I just read, you're going to see some flavor of that reflected in these chapters. Okay? That's why I'm putting all these scriptures in the context of the New Covenant. Because these themes overlap with what we're going to see in the New Covenant chapters in 30 and 31. Okay?
Is at 30%.
Jeremiah 30. The word which came to Jeremiah from Yahweh saying. Okay? So, this is the beginning of this oration. This is the beginning of the message. Okay? It's going to start here, and it's going to go all the way through to the end of chapter 31. Thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel, Write all the words which I have spoken to you in a book. For behold, days are coming, declares Yahweh, when I will restore the fortunes of my people, Israel and Judah. He's mentioning them separately again. Yahweh says, I will also bring them back to the land that I gave to their forefathers, and they shall possess it. Now these are the words which Yahweh spoke concerning Israel and concerning Judah. For thus says Yahweh, I have heard a sound of terror, of dread, and there is no peace. Ask now and see if a male can give birth. Why do I see every man with his hands on his loins as a woman in childbirth? If only Jeremiah could have seen what it's like now. I joke about it, but what else can you do? This nation is in the depths of depravity, guys. And there's only one way out. And why have all faces turned pale? Alas, for that day is great, there is none like it, and it is the time of Jacob's distress, but he will be saved from it. It shall come about on that day, declares Yahweh of hosts, that I will break his yoke from off their neck, and will tear off their bonds, and strangers will no longer make them their slaves. So what I'm reading here, okay, this time of Jacob's trouble, this time of Jacob's distress, theologians will take this and they will say that this is part of the tribulation time frame at the end of the age, right? The Great Tribulation, different people interpret it different ways. There's a 7-year time frame with 3.5 and 3.5. One of those blocks of time is the time of Jacob's trouble, okay? So keep that in mind. Our own Christian scholars are putting this in the context of the last days before the coming of the Messiah. Let's keep going. Verse 9, but they shall serve Yahweh their God and David their king, whom I will raise up for them. Interesting. Fear not, O Jacob, my servant, declares Yahweh, and do not be dismayed, O Israel. For behold, I will save you from afar, and your offspring from the land of their captivity. And Jacob will return and will be quiet and at ease, and no one will make him afraid. For I am with you, declares Yahweh, to save you. Salvation? Right? For I will destroy completely all the nations where I have scattered you. Only I will not destroy you completely, but I will chasten you justly, and will by no means leave you unpunished. For thus says Yahweh, your wound is incurable, and your injury is serious. Remember how earlier he said he was going to heal our faithlessness? There is no one to plead your cause, no healing for your sore, no recovery for you. All your lovers have forgotten you. They do not seek you. For I have wounded you with the wound of an enemy. Talking about his own people. What would drive a loving father to do that? We have gone so far off the rails that he has no choice. With the punishment of a cruel one, because your iniquity is great and your sins are numerous. Why do you cry out over your injury? Your pain is incurable. Because your iniquity is great and your sins are numerous, I have done these things to you. Therefore all who devour you will be devoured, and all your adversaries, every one of them will go into captivity. They're not going to be put into jail. And he's not talking about they're going to be given over to like their lusts. They're not going to start smoking cigarettes and swearing. That's not what he's talking about. And those who plunder you will be for plunder, and all who prey upon you I will give for prey. For I will restore you to health, and I will heal you of your wounds, declares Yahweh. Because they have called you an outcast, saying, it's Zion, no one cares for her. Thus says Yahweh, behold, I will restore the fortunes of the tents of Jacob. How many times does he have to say this? And have compassion on his dwelling places. And the city will be rebuilt on its ruin. Take Isaiah 49. And the palace will stand on its rightful place. From them will proceed thanksgiving and the voice of those who celebrate. And I will multiply them, and they will not be diminished. I will also honor them, and they will not be insignificant. Their children also will be as formerly, and their congregations shall be established before me. And I will punish all their oppressors. Their leader shall be one of them, and their ruler shall come forth from their midst. And I will bring him near, and he shall approach me. For who would dare to approach me and risk his life to approach me, declares Yahweh. You shall be my people, and I will be your God. Now, if we think about the idea of the Melchizedek priesthood, to take it back to Hebrews chapter 8, right? We have a high priest in the heavenlies. The high priest was the only one that could approach the mercy seat. Who would dare to risk his life to approach me, declares Yahweh. Verse 23, behold the tempest of Yahweh. Wrath has gone forth, a sweeping tempest. It will burst on the head of the wicked. The fierce anger of Yahweh will not turn back until he has performed it and until he has accomplished the intent of his heart. In the latter days, you will understand this. So, time of Jacob's trouble kicks off the chapter in chapter 30. Theologians universally say that's at the end of the age during the tribulation. Now he's talking about, we're going to understand all this stuff he's talking about in the latter days. So, can we track that this is in the end times, last days context? verse 30, or excuse me, chapter 31. Chapter 31, the new covenant chapter. At that time, we read this earlier. Actually, no, we didn't. At that time, declares Yahweh, I will be the God of all the families of Israel, and they shall be my people. Thus says Yahweh, the people who survived the sword found grace in the wilderness, Israel, when it went to find its rest. I can't help but think of Revelation chapter 12, with the woman fleeing from the serpent, fleeing into the wilderness. Yahweh appeared to him from afar, saying, I have loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore I have drawn you with loving kindness. Again I will build you, and you will be rebuilt, O Virgin of Israel. And I'm going to make a bold statement here. When he's talking about the Virgin of Israel, or the virgin daughter of Zion, the Messiah said that in the resurrection, there is no male or female. There's no one given in marriage. The 144,000 Revelation, it calls them maidens, but yet says they're men. I think this is resurrection language. I really do. This virgin, okay? She's a virgin of Israel because she has not been defiled. She's been made new. She is a virgin. Again you will take up your tambourines and go forth to the dances of the merrymakers. Again you will plant vineyards on the hills of Samaria. The planters will plant and will enjoy them. For there will be a day when watchmen on the hills of Ephraim, that's the house of Israel, will call out, Arise and let us go up to Zion, to Yahweh our God. For thus says Yahweh, Sing aloud with gladness for Jacob, and shout among the chief of the nations. Proclaim, give praise, and say, O Yahweh, save your people. Save your people. Salvation language, huh? The remnant of Israel. Behold, I am bringing them from the north country, and will gather them from the remote parts of the earth, like he said he would in Deuteronomy 30. Among them the blind and the lame, the woman with child, and she who is in labor with child together. A great company they will return here. With weeping they will come, and by supplication I will lead them. I will make them walk by streams of waters, on a straight path in which they will not stumble. For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Hear the word of Yahweh, O nations, and declare in the coastlands far off. And say, He who has scattered Israel will gather him, and keep him as a shepherd keeps his flock. Who does the scripture say scattered Israel? It says Yahweh did, or the Lord, or God, however you want to look at it. When we go over to the book of John, the Gospel of John, what does he say the purpose of his death is going to be? He's going to die so that he can take the two folds and make them one in the land under one shepherd. He who scattered Israel will gather him, and keep him as a shepherd keeps his flock. Verse 11. For Yahweh has ransomed Jacob and redeemed him from the hand of him who is stronger than he. They will come out and shout for joy on the height of Zion, and they will be radiant over the bounty of Yahweh, over the grain and the new wine and the oil, and over the young of the flock and the herd. And their life will be like a watered garden, and they will never languish again. Never. Then the virgin will rejoice in the dance, and the young man and the old together. For I will turn their mourning into joy, and will comfort them and give them joy for their sorrow. I will fill the soul of the priests with abundance, and my people will be satisfied with my goodness, declares Yahweh. Thus says Yahweh. He's still going. This is still the ongoing context that started at the beginning of chapter 30. He hasn't broken. Thus says Yahweh. A voice is heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping. Rachel is weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children because they are no more. Now in the New Testament, we see this referenced as when Herod killed the babies. Okay? But let's slow down and unpack this. Rachel is weeping for her children. Why is she well, first off, who are her children? Rachel's children were Joseph and Benjamin. Joseph and Benjamin. Okay? So Joseph is the house of Israel. Benjamin was also part of the house of Israel. Verse 16, thus says Yahweh, restrain your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for your work will be rewarded, declares Yahweh, and they will return from the land of the enemy. There is hope for your future, declares Yahweh, and your children will return to their own territory. I have surely heard Ephraim grieving. You've chastised me, and I was chastised like an untrained calf. Bring me back that I may be restored, for you are Yahweh my God. For after I turned back, I repented, and after I was instructed, I smote on my thigh. I was ashamed and also humiliated, because I bore the reproach of my youth. Think prodigal son. Ephraim is the prodigal son. The house of Israel is the prodigal son. Verse 20, is Ephraim my dear son? Is he a delightful child? Indeed, as often as I have spoken against him, I certainly still remember him. Therefore my heart yearns for him. I will surely have mercy on him, declares Yahweh. He's going to let Ephraim back in the house. He's going to put a ring on his finger and make a feast. Verse 21, set up for yourself road marks. Place for yourself guideposts. Direct your mind to the highway, the way by which you went. Return, O Virgin of Israel. Return to these your cities. How long will you go here and there, O faithless daughter? For Yahweh has created a new thing in the earth. A woman will encompass a man. For what it's worth, I have no idea what that means. If you do, I would love for you to tell me. Verse 23. Thus says Yahweh of hosts, the God of Israel, once again they will speak this word in the land of Judah and in its cities when I restore their fortunes. How many times does he have to talk about restoring the fortunes of Israel and Judah? Yahweh bless you, O abode of righteousness, O holy hill. Judah and all its cities will dwell together in it, the farmer and they who go about with flocks. For I satisfy the weary ones and refresh every one who languishes. At this I awoke and looked, and my sleep was pleasant to me. And then he keeps going right into verse 27. Okay? Now he does talk about like waking up, but there's no indication. When you read the book of Jeremiah, every time he gets a new word, the word of Yahweh comes to him and tells him. Okay? We don't have that break here. We keep right on going with this behold days are coming language. This is the context of the new covenant. The context of the new covenant is the regathering of the house of Israel and Judah back into the land. Why? Because it was promised to Abraham, and he made an oath that he can't break. What's he doing? He's causing them to obey his laws, keep his commandments. He's circumcising their hearts. It's connected to eternal life. Why? Because they're choosing life when they're already alive, right? All of these themes are wrapped up. He's going to be our God, and we're going to be his people. That's a covenantal relationship. That's the new covenant. But we're not done yet. Let's go to Jeremiah 33. Actually, let's go to Jeremiah 32. Jeremiah 32, let's go to verse 36. Jeremiah 32, let's start in verse 36. Now, this is interesting, because when Yahweh deals with the prophets, he often will start off talking in the local time, right? What's happening right then. And then he'll kind of branch off and he'll talk later. He might even go into the end times. And then sometimes he even jumps back to the present. He's going to do that here. So what he's been talking about in this chapter is the imminent destruction of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar in Jeremiah's days. That's what he's been talking about. But let's start reading in verse, what did I say it was? 36. And let's see where this takes us. Verse 36. Now therefore, thus says Yahweh, God of Israel, concerning this city of which you say, it is given into the hand of the king of Babylon by sword, by famine, and by pestilence. Behold, I will gather them out of all the lands which I have driven them in my anger and in my wrath and in great indignation, and I will bring them back to this place and make them dwell in safety. All the lands where I've scattered them? When Nebuchadnezzar sacked Jerusalem, he took some people to Babylon, which is one land. And he didn't take the whole people. He took some of the priests, he took some of the nobles like Daniel and his friends, and he left the poor farmers there to till the land, basically as slave labor. Okay? But we're talking about here, he's going to bring them back from all the lands. Okay? They shall be my people, and I will be their God. That same language. I will give them one heart. This is why I'm putting this in with New Covenant. I will give them one heart and one way, that they may fear me always for their own good and for the good of their children after them. Now, if I go back to Deuteronomy 30, what were we told was for our own good? The commandments, Yahweh's law, which was not too hard. The word is near, it's in our mouth. Verse 40, I will make an everlasting covenant. I will make an everlasting covenant with them, that I will not turn away from them to do them good, and I will put the fear of me in their hearts, so that they will not turn away from me. Now, this is an everlasting covenant. If I go back to the time of Nebuchadnezzar, did Yahweh make this everlasting covenant then? No. No, he didn't. So if we're going to say that the new covenant is like the final covenant, which I believe it is, it has to be this, because it's an everlasting covenant. But he's talking about gathering the people back, same as he always was. Verse 41, I will rejoice over them to do them good, and will faithfully plant them in this land with all my heart and all my soul. For thus says Yahweh, just as I brought all this great disaster on this people, so I am going to bring on them all the good that I am promising them. Fields will be bought in this land, of which you say, it's a desolation, without man or beast. It's given into the hand of the Chaldeans. Men will buy fields for money, sign and seal deeds, and call in witnesses in the land of Benjamin, and the environs of Jerusalem, and the cities of Judah, and the cities of the hill country, and the cities of the lowland, and in the cities of Negev. For I will restore their fortunes, declares Yahweh. Now you might say, well, James, 1948, Israel. Did he make an everlasting covenant? No. Okay, so now let's go to Jeremiah 33. Let's keep on right on reading. My Zondervan says, restoration promised. Let's see what they mean. We're going to read the whole chapter. Then the word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah the second time. Okay, that's how I know that we're dealing with a big block of context starting in 30. Okay, that was one time. Now he's doing a second time here. Then the word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah the second time while he was still confined in the court of the guard, saying, and I forgot to mention something. Let me back up. I don't think I have my Septuagint with me, but if I go back to Jeremiah 31, and I read, where is it at? Forget which verse it is, but there's a scripture where it I think it's. It might be around verse 27. It's in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament. It specifically says, in this context, that he will gather his people from the north at the Feast of Passover. At the Feast of Passover. What happened at Passover? The first Exodus? Days are coming, says Yahweh, right? When, you're not going to think about, Moses in Egypt. You're not going to think about that Exodus. You're going to think about this new one. Just something to think about. I wish I had my Septuagint. I'd open up and show you. Okay, so where was I? 33. Okay. Verse 2. Thus says Yahweh who made the earth, Yahweh who formed it to establish it. Yahweh is his name. Call to me, and I will answer you, and I will tell you great and mighty things which you do not know. For thus says Yahweh God of Israel, concerning the houses of this city, and concerning the houses of the kings of Judah, which are broken down to make a defense against the siege ramps and against the sword. So we're back in the context of the siege of Babylon. While they are coming to fight with the Chaldeans, and to fill them with the corpses of men whom I have slain in my anger and in my wrath, and I have hidden my face from this city because of all their wickedness. Behold, I will bring to it health and healing, and I will heal them, and I will reveal to them an abundance of peace and truth. I will restore the fortunes of Judah and the fortunes of Israel. Judah and Israel. I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, and will rebuild them as they were at the first. That's pretty specific, isn't it? At the first. We're talking about restoration. I will cleanse them, verse 8, from all their iniquity. All their iniquity by which they have sinned against me, and I will pardon all their iniquities by which they have sinned against me, and by which they have transgressed against me. It will be a name to me of joy, praise, and glory before all the nations of the earth, whom will hear of all the good that I do for them, and they will fear and tremble because of the good and all the peace that I make for it. Thus says Yahweh, yet again there will be heard in this place, of which you say, it's a waste, without man and without beast. That is, in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem that are desolate, without man and without inhabitant and without beast. The voice of joy, the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, the voice of those who say, give thanks to Yahweh of hosts, for Yahweh is good, for his loving kindness is everlasting. And of those who bring a thank offering, end times context, those who bring a thank offering into the house of Yahweh, for I will restore the fortunes of the land as they were at the first. How much clearer can it be, guys? Thus says Yahweh of hosts, there will be again in this place which is waste, without man or beast, and in all its cities, a habitation of shepherds who rest their flocks. In the cities of the hill country, and the cities of the lowland, in the cities of the Negev, in the land of Benjamin, in the environs of Jerusalem, and in the cities of Judah, the flocks will again pass under the hands of the one who numbers them, says Yahweh. Behold, days are coming, declares Yahweh, verse 14, when I will fulfill the good word which I have spoken concerning the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Of course, we know fulfill means do away with, like in Matthew chapter 5, right? In those days and at that time, I will cause a righteous branch of David to spring forth, and he shall execute justice and righteousness on the earth. In those days, Judah will be saved, and Jerusalem will dwell in safety. And this is the name by which she will be called, Yahweh is our righteousness. Has Jerusalem ever dwelt in safety? No. No. This is coming. I get excited, guys. I can't wait. Your kingdom come. Verse 17. For thus says Yahweh, David shall never lack a man to sit on the throne of the house of Israel. And the Levitical priests shall never lack a man before me to offer burnt offerings, to burn grain offerings, and to prepare sacrifices continually. You want to know what he's talking about? Start reading in Ezekiel 40. The word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah saying, so now he's starting up a new one, but I'm going to keep reading. This is a new prophecy, but I'm going to keep reading. The word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah saying, thus says Yahweh, if you can break my covenant for the day and my covenant for the night, so that day and night will not be at their appointed time, then my covenant may also be broken with David my servant, so that he will not have a son to reign on this throne, and with the Levitical priests, my ministers. As the host of heaven cannot be counted, and the sand of the sea cannot be measured, so I will multiply the descendants of David my servant, and the Levites who minister to me. And the word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah, saying, another vision. Have you not observed what this people has spoken, saying, the two families which Yahweh chose, he has rejected them? Thus they despise my people. No longer are they a nation in their sight. Thus says Yahweh, if my covenant for day and night shall stand not, and the fixed patterns of heaven and earth I have not established, then I would reject the descendants of Jacob. I would reject the descendants of Jacob and David my servant. What are we told? The Christian church replaced Israel, right? We need to read the whole book. Let me back up. Verse 25. Thus says Yahweh, if my covenant for day and night stand not, and the fixed patterns of heaven and earth I have not established, then I would reject the descendants of Jacob and David my servant, not taking from his descendants rulers over the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But I will restore their fortunes, and I will have mercy on them. He's connecting it back to Abraham again. And, the earth, the sun, the moon, the stars, that's all still here. It's all still in its order. Okay. Jeremiah 50 is the next one. Now, this is Babylon. Babylon. I don't even know what time we are. I'm going to read the whole chapter, because that's fun. Let's do it. Jeremiah 50. Like I said, I know this is going to be long, guys. Thank you for being with me. When I get home, I will put this over on YouTube. Okay? So with YouTube, you can watch it. If you stop it, you go back to your library. It'll pick back up where you left off. Okay? So I will do that. But for those of you that are watching it live, thank you for hanging with me. Okay, Jeremiah 50. Let's read the whole thing. The word which Yahweh spoke concerning Babylon, the land of the Chaldeans, through Jeremiah the prophet. This is one of those ones that's going to have some context for the immediate invasion of Jerusalem, but it's going to have some other context too. Declare and proclaim among the nations, the Gentiles. Proclaim it and lift up a standard. Do not conceal it, but say, Babylon has been captured. Bel, the god of Babylon, has been put to shame. Marduk, another god of Babylon, has been shattered. Her images have been put to shame. Her idols have been shattered. For a nation has come up against her out of the north. It will make her land an object of horror, and there will be no inhabitant in it. Both man and beast have wandered off, they've gone away. In those days and at that time, declares Yahweh, the sons of Israel will come, both they and the sons of Judah as well. They will go along weeping as they go, and it will be Yahweh their God they will seek. Again, let's go back to Deuteronomy 30, right? Deuteronomy 30. All this is tracking back to Deuteronomy 30. They will ask the way for Zion, verse 5, turning their faces in its direction. They will come that they may join themselves to Yahweh in an everlasting covenant that will not be forgotten. The sons of Israel and the sons of Judah coming along weeping, asking the way to Zion. They're coming to join themselves to Yahweh in an everlasting covenant that will not be forgotten. I had to repeat it. Verse 6. My people have become lost sheep. Their shepherds have led them astray. Boy, have they ever. They've made them turn aside on the mountains. They've gone along from mountain to hill and have forgotten their resting place. All who came upon them have devoured them, and their adversaries have said, we're not guilty. They've sinned against Yahweh, who is the habitation of righteousness, even Yahweh, the hope of their fathers. We have a commandment. Most English translations say, this is one of the big 10. I'm sorry, the big 9. The big 8. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord in vain. Most of your English will say. Thou shalt not take the name of Yahweh and make it nothing, is what it literally says. The name of Yahweh is more than just the Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, how we pronounce it. It's his reputation. It's his authority. It's his honor and esteem. What are we being told? They've sinned against Yahweh, who is the habitation of righteousness, even Yahweh, the hope of their fathers. The nations are going to see this. The nations are going to realize, hey, these guys sold out the one who bought them. Verse 8, wander away from the midst of Babylon. Come out of her, my people, right? And go forth from the land of the Chaldeans. Be also like male goats at the head of the flock. For behold, I'm going to arouse and bring up against Babylon a horde of great nations from the land of the north, and they will draw up their battle lines against her. From there she will be taken captive. Their arrows will be like an expert warrior who does not return empty-handed. Chaldea will become plunder. All who plunder her will have enough. Now, I'm going to propose a radical theory here. I have heard all kinds of interpretations on what this means. The primary one being that America's Babylon. These arrows, these nations that are coming from the north, well, that's Russia, and missiles coming over the Arctic, over Canada, all this kind of stuff, right? What did we read earlier about Israel being returned from the land of the north, plundering their enemies, executing judgment on their enemies in the context of the last days? Is it possible that this confederacy of great nations coming from the north attacking Babylon could be end times Israel? Just a thought. Verse 11, because you are glad, because you are jubilant, you who plunder, you who pillage my heritage. Whose is heritage? Israel? Because you skip about like a threshing heifer, and neigh like stallions. Your mother will be greatly ashamed. She who gave you birth will be humiliated, because she will be the least of the nations, a wilderness, a parched land, and a desert. Because of the indignation of Yahweh, she will not be inhabited, but she will be completely desolate. Everyone who passes by Babylon will be horrified, and will hiss because of all her wounds. Draw up your battle lines against Babylon on every side, all you who bend the bow. Shoot at her. Do not be sparing with your arrows, for she has sinned against Yahweh. Raise your battle cry against her on every side. She's given herself up. Her pillars have fallen. Her walls have been torn down. For this is the vengeance of Yahweh. Take vengeance on her. As she has done to others, do so to her. Cut off the sower from Babylon, and the one who wields the sickle at the time of harvest. From before the sword of the oppressor, they will each turn back to his own people, and they will each flee to his own land. Verse 17. Israel is a scattered flock. The lions have driven them away. The first one who devoured him was the king of Assyria. And this last one who has broken his bones is Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Therefore, so Assyria dealt with the northern kingdom, the house of Israel, and Nebuchadnezzar dealt with the southern kingdom, Judah. That's what he's talking about here. Therefore, thus says Yahweh of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I'm going to punish the king of Babylon and his land, just as I punished the king of Assyria. And I will bring Israel back to his pasture, and he will graze on Carmel and Bashan. These are lands in the north. And his desire will be satisfied in the hill country of Ephraim and Gilead. In those days and at that time, declares Yahweh, search will be made for the iniquity of Israel, but there will be none, and for the sins of Judah, but they will not be found, for I will pardon those whom I leave as a remnant. Sounds kind of like Jeremiah 31. Against the land of Merathaim, go up against it, and against the inhabitants of Pekod. Slay and utterly destroy them, declares Yahweh, and do according to all that I have commanded you. The noise of battle is in the land and great destruction. How the hammer of the whole earth has been cut off and broken. How Babylon has become an object of horror among the nations. I set a snare for you, and you were also caught, O Babylon, while you yourself were not aware. You've been found and also seized because you've engaged in conflict with Yahweh. Verse 25. Yahweh has opened his armory and has brought forth the weapons of his indignation, for it is a work of Yahweh Elohim of hosts in the land of the Chaldeans. Come to her from the farthest border, open up her barns, pile her up like heaps, and utterly destroy her. Let nothing be left to her. Put all her young bulls to the sword, let them go down to the slaughter. Woe be upon them, for their day has come, the time of their punishment. Verse 28, there is a sound of fugitives and refugees from the land of Babylon, to declare in Zion the vengeance of Yahweh our God, vengeance for his temple. Summon many against Babylon, all those who bend the bow, and camp against her on every side. Let there be no escape. Repay her according to her work, according to all that she has done, so do to her. For she has become arrogant against Yahweh, against the Holy One of Israel. Therefore her young men will fall in her streets, and all her men of war will be silenced in that day, declares Yahweh. Behold, I am against you, O arrogant one, declares Yahweh, God of hosts. For your day is come, the time when I will punish you. The arrogant one will stumble and fall with no one to raise him up, and I will set fire to his cities, and it will devour all his environs. Verse 33. Thus says Yahweh of hosts, the sons of Israel are oppressed, and the sons of Judah as well. Israel and Judah, Israel and Judah, Israel and Judah. How many times does he have to tell us what's going on? And all who took them captive have held them fast. They have refused to let them go. All who took them captive, he will set the captives free, right? We're not talking about smoking and cussing and pornography and alcohol. We're talking that's the fruits of the Spirit, guys. That's self-control. Anybody in the world can break free of their vices if they want to. Yes, you can use your faith in God, in Yahweh, in Yahshua, in Jesus, whatever you want to say. You can use that faith to tap into your self-control, but other people can use their faith in other things. He's not talking about that when he says he's going to set the captives free. Verse 34, their Redeemer is strong. Yahweh of hosts is his name. He will vigorously plead their case so that he may bring rest to the earth, but turmoil to the inhabitants of Babylon. A sword against the Chaldeans, declares Yahweh, and against the inhabitants of Babylon, and against her officials and her wise men. A sword against the oracle priests, and they will become fools. A sword against her mighty men, they will be shattered. A sword against their horses and against their chariots, and against all foreigners who are in the midst of her. They will become like women. So he just set a time frame on this, 2023. Just kidding. Okay, so, where was I? A sword against her treasures, and they will be plundered. Verse 38. A drought on her waters, and they will be dried up. For it is a land of idols, and they were mad over fearsome idols. Verse 39. Therefore the desert creatures will live there along with the jackals. The ostriches also will live in it, and it will never again be inhabited or dwelt in from generation to generation. As when Elohim or God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah with its neighbors, declares Yahweh. No man will live there, nor will any son of man reside on it. I'm going to keep reading. Behold, a people is coming from the north. Verse 41. A great nation and many kings will be aroused from the remotest parts of the earth. They seize their bow and javelin. They are cruel and have no mercy. Their voice roars like the sea, and they ride on horses. Marshaled like a man for the battle against you, O daughter of Babylon. The king of Babylon has heard the report about them, and his hands hang limp. Distress has gripped him, agony like a woman in childbirth. Verse 44. Behold, one will come up like a lion from the thicket of the Jordan, to a perennially watered pasture. For in an instant I will make them run away from it, and whoever is chosen I will appoint over it. For who is like me, and who will summon me into court? And who then is the shepherd who can stand before me? I know who the shepherd is that can stand before him. Verse 45, therefore hear the plan of Yahweh which he has planned against Babylon, and his purposes which he has purposed against the land of the Chaldeans. Surely they will drag them off, even the little ones of the flock. Surely he will make their pastures desolate because of them. At the shout, Babylon has been seized. The earth is shaken. The earth is shaken. Sounds a little bit like Revelation, right? And an outcry is heard among the nations. Whew. That's heavy stuff, guys. But we're not done. No, there's more context for the new covenant in the Old Testament. Now we're going to go to Ezekiel. We're going to skip Lamentations because I don't really feel like being sad right now. This is inspiring, guys. If this idea of Yahweh restoring his people and actually doing what he said he was going to do doesn't give you hope, I don't know what will. This is why I will say to my dying day that the gospel is bigger than John 3:16. Yes, John 3:16 is vital to the good news, but it's the good news of the kingdom. It's not the good news of save your butt out of hell. It's the good news of the kingdom. Everything we've been reading about here is the good news of the kingdom. This everlasting covenant that he's going to usher in, where he's going to be our God, we're going to be his people. All right, Ezekiel 11. Going to power through, guys. Ezekiel 11. Let's start reading in verse 14. Ezekiel 11, starting in verse 14. My Zondervan says, promise of restoration. Let's see what that's about. Then the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, the Son of man, your brothers, your relatives, your fellow exiles. So Ezekiel is speaking as one of the exiles. Okay? Nebuchadnezzar has already come in by this point and sacked Babylon. So he's in exile. All right? He's in captivity. The whole house of Israel, all of them, the whole house of Israel, all of them, are those of whom the inhabitants of Jerusalem have said, go far from Yahweh. This land has been given to us as a possession. In other words, right? It's only for the Jews. You Gentiles shouldn't have anything to do with this, right? Verse 16, therefore say, thus says Yahweh Elohim, though I had removed them far away among the nations, and though I had scattered them among the countries, yet I was a sanctuary for them a little while in the countries where they had gone. Remember in Jeremiah 31 what he said? He who scattered Israel will gather him, in the context of the new covenant. Verse 17, therefore say, thus says Yahweh Elohim, I will gather you from the peoples and assemble you out of the countries among which you have been scattered, and I will give you heaven. No. I will give you the land of Israel. When they come there, they will remove all its detestable things and all its abominations from it. And I will give them one heart and put a new spirit within them, and I will take the heart of stone out of their flesh and give them a heart of flesh. Have we heard this language before? Does it sound familiar? Why is he doing this? Verse 20, that they may walk in my statutes and keep my ordinances and do them. Do them. Then they will be my people, and I will be their God. But as for those whose hearts go after their detestable things and abominations, I will bring their conduct on their own heads. Why? Why is he bringing their own conduct on their own heads? Because if you don't have the blood of the Lamb to cover your sins, it's your own blood that's going to cover your sins, and I guarantee you don't want to be in that place. That's where these guys are going to be at. Okay, so, verse 22, then the cherubim lifted up their wings with the wheels beside them, and the glory of the God of Israel hovered over them. The glory of Yahweh went up from the midst of the city and stood over the mountain which is east of the city, the mountain of Olives. And the Spirit lifted me up and brought me in a vision by the Spirit of Elohim to the exiles in Chaldea. So the vision that I had seen left me. Then I told the exiles all the things that Yahweh has shown me. So the Spirit of Yahweh, okay? So Yahweh's, the glory of Yahweh, right? Leaves the temple. Okay, it leaves the temple and it goes and stands on the Mount of Olives. That's the one east of the city. And then he leaves. And Zechariah, what do we see happening in the Mount of Olives? We see Jerusalem being attacked. We see Yahweh setting his feet down on the Mount of Olives. Coincidence? I don't know. Let's go to Ezekiel 16. I'm not going to read the whole chapter because it's not kid-friendly. This is basically talking about how wicked Israel and Judah were, and comparing them to the other corrupt nations around them like Sodom. Okay? I'm going to go down. Let's start reading. Okay, I'm going to start reading in Ezekiel chapter 16 and verse 33. Nevertheless, so he's been talking about all this wickedness. Nevertheless, I will restore their captivity. The captivity of Sodom and her daughters, the captivity of Samaria, that's the northern kingdom, and her daughters, along with them your own captivity, meaning Judah. in order that you may bear your humiliation and feel ashamed for all that you have done when you become a consolation to them. Your sisters, Sodom with her daughters and Samaria with her daughters, will return to their former state. You with your daughters will also return to your former state, restoration. As the name of your sister Sodom was not heard from your lips in the day of your pride, before your wickedness was uncovered, so now you have become the reproach of the daughters of Edom, and all who are around her, of the daughters of the Philistines, those surrounding you who despise you. You have borne the penalty of your lewdness and abominations, Yahweh declares. For thus says Yahweh God, I will also do with you as you have done, you who have despised the oath by breaking the covenant. Okay? They broke the covenant. Presumably he's talking about the Mosaic covenant. Let's see what's going to happen here. Verse 60. Nevertheless, I will remember my covenant with you in the days of your youth, and I will establish an everlasting covenant with you. Then you will remember your ways and be ashamed when you receive your sisters, both your older and your younger sister, and I will give them to you as daughters, but not because of your covenant. Thus I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall know that I am Yahweh, so that you may remember and be ashamed and never open your mouth any more because of your humiliation. When I have forgiven you for all that you've done, Yahweh God declares it. So he's remembering the covenant that they broke, and he's establishing an everlasting covenant. I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not like the ones I made with their forefathers when I brought them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant which they broke, even though I was a husband to them. Ezekiel 20. I'm going to read the whole chapter because I love this chapter. Now in the 7th year, in the 5th month, in the 10th of the month, certain of the elders of Israel came to inquire of Yahweh and sat before me. Ezekiel. Son of man, speak to the elders of Israel and say to them, Thus says Yahweh Elohim, Do you come to inquire of me? As I live, declares Yahweh Elohim, I will not be inquired of you. Will you judge them? Will you judge them, son of man? Will you judge them, son of man? Oh, yeah. Yeah, son of man is going to judge them. Okay. Make them know the abominations of their fathers and say to them, Thus says Yahweh Elohim, on the day when I chose Israel and swore to the descendants of the house of Jacob and made myself known to them in the land of Egypt, when I swore to them, saying, I am Yahweh your God. On that day I swore to them to bring them out from the land of Egypt into a land that I had selected for them, flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory of all lands. I said to them, Cast away, each of you, the detestable things of his eyes, and do not defile yourselves with the idols of Egypt. I am Yahweh your God. Verse 8, But they rebelled against me and were not willing to listen to me. They did not cast away the detestable things of their eyes, nor did they forsake the idols of Egypt. Then I resolved to pour out my wrath on them, to accomplish my anger against them in the midst of the land of Egypt. But I acted for the sake of my name, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the nations among whom they lived, in whose sight I made myself known to them by bringing them out of the land of Egypt. So I took them out of the land of Egypt and brought them into the wilderness. I gave them my statutes and informed them of my ordinances, by which, if a man observes them, he will live. Talking about people who were already alive. Also, I gave them my Sabbaths. Why? To be a burden. To Judaize. No. To be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am Yahweh, who sanctifies them, who makes them holy. Verse 13. But the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not walk in my statutes, and they rejected my ordinances, by which, if a man observes them, he will live. And my Sabbaths they greatly profaned. Then I resolved to pour out my wrath on them in the wilderness to annihilate them. But I acted for the sake of my name, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the nations, before whose sight I had brought them out. Also I swore to them in the wilderness that I would not bring them into the land which I had given them, flowing with milk and honey, which is the glory of all lands. Why? Because they rejected my ordinances, and as for my statutes, they did not walk in them. They even profaned my Sabbaths, for their heart continually went after their idols. Does it talk about the Jewish Sabbaths? No, he says my Sabbaths. Multiple times. Verse 17, Yet my eye spared them rather than destroying them, and I did not cause their annihilation in the wilderness. I said to their children in the wilderness, Do not walk in the statutes of your fathers, or keep their ordinances, or defile yourselves with their idols. I am Yahweh your God. Walk in my statutes, and keep my ordinances, and observe them. So the people made their own statutes and ordinances instead of following the fathers. Teaching as doctrines the traditions of men, right? Verse 19. I am Yahweh your God. Walk in my statutes and keep my ordinances and observe them. Sanctify my Sabbaths, and they shall be a sign between me and you, that you may know that I am Yahweh your God. Verse 21. But the children rebelled against me. They did not walk in my statutes, nor were they careful to observe my ordinances, by which, if a man observes them, he will live. They profane my Sabbaths. So I resolved to pour out my wrath on them, to accomplish my anger against them in the wilderness. But I withdrew my hand and acted for the sake of my name, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the nations, in whose sight I had brought them out. Also I swore to them in the wilderness, that I would scatter them among the nations. Think back to Deuteronomy 30. I would scatter them among the nations and disperse them among the lands. Why? Because they had not observed my ordinances, but they had rejected my statutes and had profaned my Sabbaths. Their eyes were on the idols of their fathers. I also gave them statutes that were not good, and ordinances by which they could not live. And people will say, See, they don't read what came before. He's talking about punishing them. All these statutes and ordinances that they would live by, if they kept them, they weren't. So now he's giving them bad statutes and ordinances as a punishment. He's not talking about his Torah here, guys. He's not talking about his holy commandments. This is something that's being put on them as a punishment because they weren't keeping his commandments. Read the whole chapter, theologians. Verse 25, I gave them statutes that were not good and ordinances by which they could not live. And I pronounced them unclean because of their gifts, in which they caused all of their firstborn to pass through the fire, so that I might make them desolate, in order that they might know that I am Yahweh. Therefore, son of man, speak to the house of Israel, and say to them, Thus says Yahweh Elohim, Yet in this your fathers have blasphemed me by acting treacherously against me. When I had brought them into the land which I swore to give them, then they saw every high hill, and every leafy tree. And they offered there their sacrifices, and there they presented the provocation of their offering. There also they made their soothing aroma, and there they poured out their drink offerings. Then I said to them, What is the high place to which you go? So its name is called Bamah to this day. Verse 30, Therefore say to the house of Israel, Thus says Yahweh Elohim, Will you defile yourselves after the manner of your fathers and play the harlot after their detestable things? When you offer your gifts, when you cause your sons to pass through the fire, you are defiling yourselves with all your idols to this day. And shall I be inquired of you, O house of Israel? As I live, declares Yahweh, I will not be inquired of you. Why doesn't Yahweh hear our prayers? Why doesn't Yahweh speak to me? Verse 32, What comes into your mind will not come about when you say, We will be like the nations, like the tribes of the land, serving wood and stone. Verse 33, As I live, this is an oath. He's swearing by himself, As I live, this will happen. Declares Yahweh Elohim, Surely with a mighty hand and with an outstretched arm and with wrath poured out, I shall be king over you. If he's going to be king, does that mean there's a kingdom? I will bring you out from the peoples and gather you from the lands where you are scattered, with a mighty hand and with outstretched arm and with wrath poured out. And will bring you into the wilderness of the peoples, and there I will enter into judgment with you face to face. As I entered into judgment with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt, so I will enter into judgment with you, declares Yahweh Elohim. I will make you pass under the rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. The covenant. Not a covenant. The covenant. Definite article, meaning there's only one covenant, and that's the one he's talking about. Verse 38, and I will purge from you the rebels and those who transgress against me. I will bring them out of the land where they sojourn, but they will not enter into the land of Israel. Thus you will know that I am Yahweh. That sounds an awful lot like Edward G. Robinson in the first Exodus, right? Verse 39, as for you, O house of Israel, thus says Yahweh God, go serve everyone as idols, but later you will surely listen to me, and my holy name you will profane no longer with your gifts and with your idols. For on my holy mountain, on the high mountain of Israel, declares Yahweh Elohim, there the whole house of Israel, all of them, will serve me in the land. There I will accept them, and there I will seek your contributions and the choicest of your gifts with all your holy things. As a soothing aroma I will accept you when I bring you out from the peoples and gather you from the lands where you are scattered, and I will prove myself holy among you in the sight of the nations. Verse 42, and you will know that I am Yahweh when I bring you into the land of Israel, into the land which I swore to give to your fathers. He's fulfilling the Abrahamic promises. This is what Paul's talking about in Galatians. This is what we're tracking back into. It's not about being Jewish. No, this is bigger than first century Pharisaic Judaism. No. This is what the house of Israel and the house of Judah and all the ones who travel in from the nations who want to bond to the God of Israel, this is them. This is the prize. Verse 43, there you will remember your ways and all your deeds with which you have defiled yourselves, and you will loathe yourselves in your own sight for all the evil things that you have done. Then you will know that I am Yahweh when I have dealt with you for my name's sake. Why? Because we profaned his name, we've brought his name to nothing. Not according to your evil ways or according to your corrupt deeds, O house of Israel, declares Yahweh Elohim. All right. Let's go to Ezekiel 34. Now, I'm going to read the whole chapter. I have to. Then the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel. I read in my New Testament where the Son of Man did exactly that. Isn't that cool? Prophesy, and say to those shepherds, Thus says Yahweh Elohim, Woe, shepherds of Israel, who have been feeding themselves. Should not the shepherds feed the flock? You eat the fat and clothe yourselves with the wool. You slaughter the fat sheep without feeding the flock. Those who are sickly you've not strengthened. The diseased you have not healed. The broken you've not bound up. The scattered you have not brought back. Nor have you sought for the lost. But with force and with severity you have dominated them. They were scattered for lack of a shepherd. And they became food for every beast of the field and were scattered. My flock wandered through all the mountains and on every high hill. My flock was... Excuse me, guys. Reading a lot here. Voice is going hoarse. Verse 8. As I live, declares Yahweh Elohim, surely because my flock has become a prey. My flock has even become food for all the beasts of the field for lack of a shepherd. And my shepherds did not search for my flock, but rather the shepherds fed themselves and did not feed my flock. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of Yahweh. I don't want to be the shepherd that hears this word. Thus says Yahweh Elohim, Behold, I am against the shepherds, and I will demand my sheep from them and make them cease from feeding sheep. So the shepherds will not feed themselves any more, but I will deliver my flock from their mouth, so that they will not be food for them. Verse 11. For thus says Yahweh Elohim, behold, I myself will search for my sheep and will seek them out. Remember in Jeremiah 31 with the new covenant, he who scattered Israel will gather them? Right? Verse 12. As a shepherd cares for his herd in the day when he is among his scattered sheep, so I will care for my sheep and will deliver them from all the places to which they were scattered on a cloudy and gloomy day. I will bring them out from the peoples and gather them from the countries and bring them to their own land, and I will feed them where? On the mountains of Israel, by the streams and in all the inhabited places of the land. I will feed them on a good pasture, and their grazing ground will be on the mountain heights of Israel, where they used to worship idols. There they will lie down on good grazing ground and feed in rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. I will feed my flock, and I will lead them to rest, declares Yahweh Elohim. I will seek the lost, bring back the scattered, bind up the broken, and strengthen the sick. But the fat and strong I will destroy. I will feed them with judgment. As for you, my flock, thus says Yahweh Elohim, behold, I will judge between one sheep and another, between the rams and the male goats. Is it too slight a thing for you that you should feed in the good pasture, that you must tread down with your feet the rest of your pastures? Or that you should drink of the clear waters, that you must foul the rest with your feet? As for my flock, they must eat what you tread down with your feet, and drink what you foul with your feet. Therefore, thus says Yahweh Elohim to them, behold, I, even I, will judge between the fat sheep and the lean sheep, because you pushed with side and with shoulder, and thrusted all the weak with your horns until you've scattered them abroad. Therefore I will deliver my flock, and they will no longer be a prey, and I will judge between one sheep and another. Now, if I go to the New Testament, when is all this judgment language happening? Judging, between like the wheat and the chaff, the sheep and the goats. When is all that happening? At the return of the Son of Man at the end of the age, right? So this is end times context. Verse 23, then I will set over them one shepherd, my servant David, and he will feed them. He will feed them himself and be their shepherd. And I, Yahweh, will be their God, and my servant David will be prince among them. I, Yahweh, have spoken. I will make a covenant of peace with them, and eliminate harmful beasts from the land, so that they may live securely in the wilderness and sleep in the woods. I will make them and the places around my hill a blessing, and I will cause showers to come down in their season. They will be showers of blessing. Also, the tree of the field will yield its fruit, and the earth will yield its increase, and they will be secure on their land. Then they will know that I am Yahweh, when I have broken the bars of their yoke, and have delivered them from the hand of those who enslaved them. They will no longer be a prey to the nations, the Gentiles, and the beasts of the earth will not devour them, but they will live securely, and no one will make them afraid. I will establish for them a renowned planting place, and they will not again be victims of famine in the land. They will not endure the insults of the nations anymore. So if you're going to say that the modern nation of Israel is the fulfillment of all this, I think they're bearing the insults of the nations every single day, right? Verse 30, then they will know that I, Yahweh their God, am with them, and that they, the house of Israel, are my people, declares Yahweh God. As for you, my sheep, the sheep of my pasture, you are men, and I am your God, declares Yahweh Elohim. Now let's go to Ezekiel 36. Okay, Ezekiel 36, this is getting into some of the Gog-Magog stuff, all right? I'm going to start reading in verse... Why not? Verse 1. Ezekiel 36, verse 1. And you, son of man, prophesy to the mountains of Israel and say, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of Yahweh. Thus says Yahweh Elohim, because the enemy has spoken against you, aha! And the everlasting heights have become our possession. Therefore prophesy and say, Thus says Yahweh Elohim, For good reason they've made you desolate and crushed you from every side, that you have become a possession of the rest of the nations, and you've been taken up in the talk and the whispering of the people. Therefore, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of Yahweh Elohim. Thus says Yahweh, God, to the mountains and to the hills, to the ravines and to the valleys, the desolate wastes, and to the forsaken cities which have become a prey and a derision to the rest of the nations, the Gentiles, which are round about. Therefore, thus says Yahweh God, therefore, in the fire of my jealousy I have spoken against the rest of the nations, and against all Edom, who appropriated my land for themselves as a possession, with wholehearted joy and with scorn of soul to drive it out for a prey. Therefore prophesy concerning the land of Israel, and say to the mountains and to the hills, to the ravines and to the valleys, Thus says Yahweh Elohim, Behold, I have spoken in my jealousy and in my wrath, because you have endured the insults of the nations. Therefore, thus says Yahweh God, I have sworn that surely the nations which are around you will themselves endure their insults. But you, O mountains of Israel, will put forth your branches and bear your fruit for my people Israel, for they will soon come. For behold, I am for you, and I will turn to you, and you will be cultivated and sown. I will multiply men on you, all the house of Israel, all of it. And the cities will be inhabited, and the waste places will be rebuilt. I will multiply on you man and beast, and they will increase you and be fruitful. Remember the new covenant, Jeremiah 31, I will sow the house of Israel and the house of Judah with man and beast. I will multiply on you man and beast, and they will increase and be fruitful, and I will cause you to be inhabited as you were formerly, and will treat you better than at the first. Thus you will know that I am Yahweh. Yes, I will cause men, my people Israel. I'm sorry, guys. Oh, man. I need a humidifier. Or some rain. Rain would be good, right? Okay. Where was I? Verse 12. Yes, I will cause men, my people Israel, to walk on you and possess you. Wait a minute. Who was supposed to possess this land? Abraham and his descendants as an everlasting possession. Interesting. So that you will become their inheritance and never again bereave them of children. Never again. Thus says Yahweh Elohim, verse 13, because they say to you, you are a devourer of men, and have bereaved your nation of children, therefore you will no longer devour men, and no longer bereave your nation of children, declares Yahweh Elohim. I will not let you hear insults from the nations any more, nor will you bear disgrace from the peoples any longer, nor will you cause your nation to stumble any longer, declares Yahweh Elohim. Then the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, when the house of Israel was living in their own land, they defiled it by their ways and their deeds. Their way before me was like the uncleanness of a woman in her impurity. Therefore I poured out my wrath on them for the blood which they had shed on the land, because they had defiled it with their idols. Also I scattered them among the nations, and they were dispersed throughout the lands. According to their ways and their deeds I judged them. When they came to the nations where they went, they profaned my holy name, because it was said of them, These are the people of Yahweh? Yet they have come out of his land. But I had concern for my holy name, reputation, authority, honor, which the house of Israel had profaned among the nations where they went. Verse 22. Therefore say to the house of Israel, Thus says Yahweh Elohim, It is not for your sake, O house of Israel, that I am about to act, but for my holy name, which you profaned among the nations where you went. I will vindicate the holiness of my great name, which has been profaned among the nations, which you have profaned in their midst. Then the nations will know that I am Yahweh, declares Yahweh Elohim, when I prove myself holy among you in their sight. If Yahweh is already holy to his people, why does he have to prove himself holy among, the nations? Our faith isn't what we think it is. Verse 24, for I will take you from the nations, gather you from all the lands, and bring you into your own land. Then I will think Deuteronomy 30. Then I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your filthiness and from all your idols. Moreover, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. And I will remove the heart of stone, this is new covenant language, from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you. Why? To cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will be careful to observe my ordinances. You will live in the land that I gave to your forefathers. Why? So you will be my people, and I will be your God. How many times does he have to say it? Moreover, I will save you from all your uncleanness, and I will call for the grain and multiply it, and I will not bring famine on you. I will multiply the fruit of the tree and the produce of the field, so that you will not receive again the disgrace of famine among the nations. Then you will remember your evil ways and your deeds that were not good, and you will loathe yourselves in your own sight for your iniquities and your abominations. I'm not doing this for your sake, declares Yahweh Elohim. Let it be known to you. Be ashamed and confounded for your ways, O house of Israel. Thus says Yahweh Elohim, on the day that I cleanse you from all your iniquities. That's new covenant language. I will cause the cities to be inhabited, and the waste places to be rebuilt. The desolate land will be cultivated instead of being a desolation in the sight of everyone who passes by. They will say, this desolate land has become like the Garden of Eden. Restoration. And the waste, desolate, and ruined cities are fortified and inhabited. Then the nations that are left round about you will know that I, Yahweh, have rebuilt the ruined places and planted that which was desolate. I, Yahweh, have spoken and will do it. Thus says Yahweh Elohim, this also I will let the house of Israel ask me to do for them. I will increase their men like a flock. Like the flock for sacrifices, like the flock at Jerusalem during her appointed feasts, so will the waste cities be filled with flocks of men. They will know that I am Yahweh. Ezekiel 37, let's keep right on reading. The hand of Yahweh was upon me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of Yahweh, and set me down in the middle of the valley, and it was full of bones. He caused me to pass among them round about, and behold, there are very many on the surface of the valley, and lo, they were very dry. He said to me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I answered, O Yahweh God, you know. Again he said to me, prophesy over these bones, and say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of Yahweh. Thus says Yahweh Elohim to these bones, behold, I will cause breath to enter into you, that you may come to life. I will put sinews on you, make flesh grow back on you, cover you with skin, and put breath in you, that you may come alive, and you will know that I am Yahweh. So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I prophesied, there was a noise, and behold, a rattling, and the bones came together, bone to its bone. And I looked, and behold, sinews were on them, and flesh grew, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. Then he said to me, prophesy to the breath, prophesy, son of man, and say to the breath, thus says Yahweh Elohim, come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe on these slain, that they may come to life. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they came to life, and stood on their feet, an exceedingly great army. Verse 11. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say, our bones are dried up, and our hope has perished. We are completely cut off. Therefore prophesy and say to them, thus says Yahweh Elohim, behold, I will open your graves, and cause you to come up out of your graves, my people, and I will bring you into the land of Israel. This is resurrection language. And when these people come out of their graves in these resurrected bodies, they're not just staying where they're at. He's taking them somewhere. I will put my spirit, verse 13. Then you will know that I am Yahweh when I have opened your graves and caused you to come up out of your graves, my people. I will put my spirit within you, and you will come to life, and I will place you on your own land. Then you will know that I, Yahweh, have spoken and done it, declares Yahweh. The word of Yahweh came again to me, saying, And you, son of man, take for yourself one stick, and write on it, for Judah and for the sons of Israel his companions. Then take another stick and write on it, for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and all the house of Israel his companions. Judah and Israel. Judah and Israel. The house of the new covenant will be made with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, right? Then join them for yourself one to another into one stick, that they might become one in your hand. When the sons of your people speak to you, saying, now, who is doing this? He keeps calling Ezekiel son of man. That should be a big hint. Who is taking these two sticks and putting them together in one hand? When the sons of your people speak to you, saying, will you not declare to us what you mean by these? Say to them, thus says Yahweh Elohim, behold, I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel, his companions, and I will put them with it, with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they will be one in my hand. The sticks on which you write will be in your hand before their eyes. Say to them, thus says Yahweh God, behold, I will take the sons of Israel from among the nations where they have gone, and I will gather them from every side and bring them into their own land. And I will make them one nation in the land on the mountains of Israel, and one king will be king for all of them, and they will no longer be two nations, and no longer be divided into two kingdoms. They will no longer defile themselves with their idols, or with their detestable things, or with any of their transgressions. But I will deliver them from all their dwelling places in which they have sinned, and I will cleanse them. They will be my people, and I will be their God. My servant David, verse 24, will be king over them, and they will all have one shepherd. Why did the Messiah lay down his life? To take the two folds and make them one. This is what he's talking about. And they will walk in my ordinances and keep my statutes and observe them. Big shocker. Like, we're totally caught off guard by that. He's only mentioned it 1,000,000 times, right? They will live on the land that I gave to Jacob my servant, in which your fathers lived. Why did he give it to Jacob his servant? Because Jacob was an heir of the promise. Right? They will live on the land that I gave to Jacob my servant, in which your fathers lived, and they will live on it, they and their sons and their sons' sons. How long? Forever. And David my servant will be their prince forever. Verse 26, I will make a covenant of peace with them, and it will be an everlasting covenant with them, and I will place them and multiply them, and will set my sanctuary in their midst forever. My dwelling place also will be with them, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. And the nations will know that I am Yahweh, who sanctifies, makes holy Israel, when my sanctuary, my holy place, is in their midst forever. Think New Jerusalem coming down from heaven so that he can live with his people forever. All right. Let's go to Zechariah now. Zechariah. A few more scriptures and then we're done. Zechariah, I have to say, it's petty, but a pet peeve of mine is when people say Zechariah. Zechariah is a name, but it's Zechariah with an E. I don't know. Accuracy matters to me. I don't know. It's a nitpicky thing, and if you say Zechariah or Zechariah, we can still be friends either way. Okay. Zechariah, we're going to read chapter 9 and 10. The burden of the word of Yahweh is against the land of Hadrach, with Damascus as its resting place. For the eyes of men, especially of all the tribes of Israel, are toward Yahweh. And Hamath also, which borders on it, Tyre and Sidon, though they are very wise. For Tyre built herself a fortress, and piled up silver like dust, and gold like the mire of the streets. Behold, the Lord will dispossess her, and cast her wealth into the sea. She will be consumed with fire. Ashkelon will see it and be afraid. Gaza too will writhe in great pain. Also Ekron, for her expectation has been confounded. Moreover, the king will perish from Gaza, and Ashkelon will not be inhabited. And a mongrel race will dwell in Ashdod. And I will cut off the pride of the Philistines, and I will remove their blood from their mouth, and their detestable things from between their teeth. Then they also will be a remnant for our God, and be like a clan in Judah, and Ekron like a Jebusite. But I will camp around my house because of an army, because of him who passes by and returns. And no oppressor will pass over them any more. For now I have seen with my eyes. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout in triumph, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and endowed with salvation, humble and mounted on a donkey, even on a colt, the foal of a donkey. I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the horse from Jerusalem, and the bow of war will be cut off. And he will speak peace to the nations, and his dominion will be from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth. We read about him riding in on the donkey, but we don't read the rest of this, guys. Verse 11. As for you also, because of the blood of my covenant with you, I have set your prisoners free from the waterless pit. Return to the stronghold, O prisoners, who have hope, who have the hope. This very day I am declaring that I will restore double to you, for I will bend Judah as my bow. I will restore double to you. I'm putting together a teaching on the book of Job for the local crowd. Okay, next month. Ezekiel 14 talks about the righteousness of Daniel, or of Noah, Daniel, and Job, right? I'm talking about Job. Job went through all of his trials and tribulations. He was righteous. And he was tested of Yahweh. He was put through the crushing. What happened to him at the end of that? Everything was restored to him double. Okay? There is reward for those who practice righteousness and hold to their integrity and do not curse the one who redeemed them, even in their trials and sufferings. Okay, so verse 13. For I will bend Judah as my bow, and fill the bow with Ephraim. And I will stir up your sons, O Zion, against your sons, O Greece, and I will make you like a warrior's sword. Then Yahweh will appear over them, and his arrow will go forth like lightning, and Yahweh God will blow the trumpet, and will march in the storm winds of the south. Yahweh of hosts will defend them, and they will devour and trample on the slingstones. And they will drink and be boisterous as with wine. They will be filled like a sacrificial basin, drenched like the corners of the altar. That's with blood. And Yahweh their God will save them in that day as the flock of his people. He who scattered Israel will gather him. For they are as the stones of a crown, sparkling in his hand. Sparkling in his land. For what comeliness and beauty will be theirs? Grain will make the young men flourish, and new wine the virgins. Chapter 10. Ask rain from Yahweh at the time of the spring rain. Yahweh who makes the storm clouds. And he will give them showers of rain, vegetation in the field to each man. For the teraphim speak iniquity. What are the teraphim? The teraphim, the teraphim are household idols. It's not fun to say this, but if you walk into a house and they have a table with little shrines to Mary, Joseph, Jesus, whatever, that is what the teraphim were. Household idols, household shrines. Okay? So, where was I? For the teraphim speak iniquity, and the diviners see lying visions and tell false dreams. They comfort in vain. Therefore the people wander like sheep. They are afflicted because there is no shepherd. Does any of this sound familiar? My anger is kindled against the shepherds, and I will punish the male goats. For Yahweh of hosts has visited his flock, the house of Judah, and will make them like his majestic horse in battle. From them will come the cornerstone, from them the tent peg, from them the bow of battle. From them every ruler, all of them together. They will be as mighty men, treading down the enemy in the mire of the streets in battle. And they will fight, for Yahweh will be with them. And the riders on horses will be put to shame. I will strengthen the house of Judah, and I will save the house of Joseph. That's the house of Israel, the northern kingdom. And I will bring them back. Think Deuteronomy 30. Because I have had compassion on them. And they will be as though I had not rejected them. For I am Yahweh their God, and I will answer them. Ephraim will be like a mighty man, and their heart will be glad, as if from wine. Indeed, their children will see it and be glad. Their heart will rejoice in Yahweh. I will whistle for them to gather them together, for I have redeemed them. And they will be as numerous as they were before. When I scatter them among the peoples, they will remember me in far countries. Deuteronomy 30. And they with their children will live and come back. I will bring them back from the land of Egypt and gather them from Assyria. And I will bring them into the land of Gilead and Lebanon, until no room can be found for them. And they will pass through the sea of distress, and he will strike the waves in the sea, so that all the depths of the Nile will dry up, and the pride of Assyria will be brought down, and the scepter of Egypt will depart, and I will strengthen them in Yahweh. And in his name they will walk. In his authority they will walk, declares Yahweh. You can't see it, but I got chills. And it's warm down here in Virginia. Let's read a couple more chapters. Let's go to Malachi, and let's read 3 and 4, and then we'll be done. Malachi chapter 3. Behold, I'm going to send my messenger, and he will clear the way before me. And the Lord, whom you seek, will suddenly come to his temple. And the messenger of the covenant, which covenant? The Abrahamic covenant, the old covenant, the new covenant. I'm going to posit to you that they're all basically the same. The purpose of the Mosaic covenant was to fulfill the Abrahamic covenant. The purpose of the new covenant is to fulfill the Abrahamic covenant. I think that's pretty clear by now with everything we just read. But let's keep going. The messenger of his covenant, in whom you delight, behold, he is coming, says Yahweh of hosts. But who can endure the day of his coming? And who can stand when he appears? For he is like a refiner's fire, and like fuller's soap. He will sit as a smelter and purifier of silver, and he will purify the sons of Levi. Why would he need to do that? I think we read about that earlier, didn't we? He will purify the sons of Levi and refine them like gold and silver, so that they may present to Yahweh offerings in righteousness. Then the offering of Judah and Jerusalem will be pleasing to Yahweh as in the days of old and as in the former years. There was a time when they weren't because of the iniquity. Then I will draw near to you for judgment, and I will be a swift witness against the sorcerers, and against the adulterers, and against those who swear falsely, and against those who oppress the wage earner in his wages, the widow and the orphan, and those who turn aside the stranger and do not fear me, says Yahweh of hosts. For I, Yahweh, do not change, and therefore you, O sons of Jacob, are not consumed. This is a huge verse. What is he saying? I, Yahweh, do not change. Therefore, you, O sons of Jacob, are not consumed. If we track this back to the Abrahamic covenant, okay, everybody says, oh, it's not the land, it's spiritual. Was he promised heaven? No, he was promised land. If Yahweh changes the promise, we cannot trust him. He swore an oath to Abraham, and he swore by himself, because there's none higher. If he changes it and makes it spiritual only, where we float up to heaven and sit there forever singing Kumbaya, we cannot trust him. Why? Because he changed. And if we cannot trust him to keep his promises as he made, how can we trust him with all these other promises he made of mercy, of compassion, of forgiveness of our sins? How can we trust him to do that if we don't trust him to do what he promised to our father Abraham? Verse 7, from the days of your fathers you have turned aside from my statutes and have not kept them. Return to me, and I will return to you. We like to quote that, but we don't like to read the verse previously. He's talking about keeping his commandments. That is how he wants us to return to him. But you say, how shall we return? Verse 8, will a man rob Elohim? Yet you are robbing me. But you say, how have we robbed you? In tithes and offerings. You are cursed with a curse, for you are robbing me, the whole nation of you. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, so that there may be food in my house, which is not your local church, with your preacher telling you to tithe while he's telling you that the law is done away with. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, so that there may be food in my house. And test me now in this, says Yahweh Elohim of hosts. And if I do not open for you the windows of heaven and pour out for you a blessing until it overflows, then I will rebuke the devourer for you, so that it will not destroy the fruits of the ground, nor will your vine in the field cast its grapes, says Yahweh of hosts. All the nations will call you blessed, all the Gentiles will call you blessed, for you shall be a delightful land, says Yahweh of hosts. Your words have been arrogant against me, says Yahweh, yet you say, what have we spoken against you? You have said, it is in vain to serve God, and what profit is it that you have kept his charge, and that we've walked in mourning before Yahweh of hosts? So now we call the arrogant blessed. Not only are the doers of wickedness built up, that they also test God and escape. Verse 16, one of my favorite passages. Then those who feared Yahweh spoke to one another, and Yahweh gave attention and heard it, and a book of remembrance was written before him for those who fear Yahweh and who esteem his name, his reputation, his honor, his authority. They will be mine, says Yahweh of hosts, on the day that I prepare my own possession, and I will spare them as a man spares his own son who serves him. So you will again distinguish between the righteous and the wicked, between one who serves Elohim and one who does not serve him. For behold, the day is coming, the last page before I turn over into Matthew. For behold, the day is coming, burning like a furnace, and all the arrogant and every evildoer will be chaff. And the day that is coming will set them ablaze, says Yahweh of hosts, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch. But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its wings, and you will go forth and skip about like calves from the stall. You will tread down the wicked, for they will be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day which I am preparing. You mean these people are going to help him judge the nations? These people are going to help him execute judgment on the wicked? Remember the Torah, the law of Moses, my servant, even the statutes and ordinances which I commanded him in Horeb, or Mount Sinai, for all Israel. Behold, I'm going to send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of Yahweh. He will restore the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, so that I will not come and smite the land with a curse. Why is the rich man separated from Abraham's bosom? Why is Lazarus in Abraham's bosom? When the rich man says, hey, send Lazarus from the dead, he can tell my relatives to repent. No. They have Moses. The hearts of the children to the fathers, and the hearts of the fathers to the children. That's Abraham's bosom. It's not a location in heaven. Anyway. So, it's probably been at least 2 hours, maybe 3 by this point. And I didn't even read all the scriptures. We could have read all the servant chapters in Isaiah, and it would have been cake. But what was the purpose of this? When we go into the New Testament, and we read the Gospels, and we read Paul's writings, and they talk about the new covenant, and they say that the new covenant did away with the old covenant, and they say that because we're in the new covenant, we don't have to keep the commandments anymore, and because we're in the new covenant, we're going to die and go to heaven. The foundation of the new covenant says otherwise, folks. That is not the new covenant. That is the new covenant made in our own image. That's our flesh defining what we want it to be. Why? Because Paul says it in Romans. Our flesh is hostile to God's law. Our flesh will not keep His commandments. So we've cherry-picked scriptures out of the New Testament, and we've ignored the wealth of information from the Old Testament so that our flesh will be pleased. The Father made it plain as day. The new covenant is the Spirit being given to us so that we can keep His commandments. Us being given a new heart so that we can keep His commandments. Us being circumcised in the hearts so that we can keep His commandments. Our sins being forgiven. We're resurrected. We're put back in the land forever to fulfill the promise with Abraham. That's the new covenant in its entirety. And we'll have one kingdom with one king, one shepherd. It will have boundaries. It is a kingdom, not a concept. That's the new covenant. That's the new covenant. And it's time that we proclaim this, guys. When they were going around, when the disciples were going around proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, this is the kind of stuff they knew. This is the faith once declared to the saints. Right? We're supposed to earnestly contend for the faith once and for all delivered to the saints. This is what they had faith in. They had no concept when this foundation was being built of the new covenant is save my butt from hell so I can live in heaven forever and sing Mercy Me songs all day. That's not what it was to these people. And it's not to the one who's making the covenant. We've got to stop letting our own fleshly desires dictate how we interpret Scripture. And we've got to let the pure, holy Word do what it does. Anyway, I've gone on long enough. I didn't come on to give a sermon. I came on to give the Word. There it is. So, if anybody has any questions, there's a lot to go through here. PM me. I'll be happy to discuss it with you. Even if you have strong opinions. Okay? Contend. Earnestly contend. I'm okay with that. I'm a big boy. I have my big boy pants on. But this is irrefutable. Everything that we just read thematically connects back to Jeremiah 31. Good night, everybody. I'm going to bed. I love you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Like I said, if you missed it earlier, I'll put this over on YouTube this weekend when I get home, but since it's so long, and guys can have it there. So thank you for tuning in. As always, Yahweh bless.